Did you know, in the books, Cersei slept with one of her king's guard in return for him accusing Marjorie of adultery? He tells her, "The thing is, the best lies have some truth in them, to give him flavor, as it were. And you want me to go tell how I the queen?" She almost slapped his face. Almost. But she had gone too far, and too much was at stake. "All I do for Tommen." She turned her head and caught Sir Osney's hand with her own, kissing his fingers. Cersei wrapped her arms around his neck. "I would not want it said I made a liar of you," she whispered in a husky voice. "Give me an hour and meet me in my bedchamber." We waited long enough. He thrust his fingers inside the bodice of her gown and yanked. The silk parted with a ripping sound so loud that Cersei was afraid that half of the Red Keep must have heard it. "Take off the rest before I tear that too." Emilia Clarke, who plays Daenerys, opened up about feeling pressured into doing her nude scenes on Game of Thrones because she was told not to disappoint her fans. In an interview on Armchair Expert, the 33-year-old actress reflected on her early days in Hollywood as a newcomer. Since having joined the HBO series fresh out of drama school, Clarke acknowledged feeling overwhelmed by the unexpected demands of the role, particularly the numerous nude scenes in season 1. She also said that she'll be forever grateful to her co-star, Jason Momoa, for looking out for her in those early days, stating that the Aquaman actor always took care of her, in an environment in which I didn't know I needed to be taken care of. Emilia Clarke recounts Jason asking someone on the set, "Can we get her a robe? She's shivering." He was so kind and considerate, and cared about me as a human being. Showrunner Miguel has confirmed that Rhaenyra fancied Alicent, which is ironic because it seems that Alicent fancies Criston Cole and Criston Cole fancies Rhaenyra, making a three-way love triangle. This decision was not pre-planned, but the young Alicent actress stated, "We were in the rehearsal room. I believe it's episode 4. I was sat on the bench. It's not necessarily something we had talked about yet. We were doing that scene and Millie and I looked at each other like, it kind of felt like we were about to kiss. And so we talked about it. We weren't making them gay or queerbaiting or anything like that. It's just, if you want to read into it and see it like that, do it. Being a queer woman myself, it was something that I was conscious of. But I wasn't consciously putting it out there. They're 14-year-old girls. They don't know the difference between platonic and romantic. They don't even know what the words mean, let alone what the feelings mean." There is a great deal of evidence that Tyrion is not Tywin's son. The main evidence comes from the fact that at the Great Anniversary Tourney of 272 AC, held to commemorate Aerys' 10th year upon the Iron Throne, Joanna Lannister brought her 6-year-old twins, Jaime and Cersei, from Castle Rock to present before the court. And then, after it was over, in 273 AC, Lady Joanna was taken to childbed once again at Castle Rock, where she died delivering Lord Tywin's second son, Tyrion. We know Aerys always lusted after Joanna, and maybe he finally had his way with her. Further evidence is Tyrion has dragon dreams. His hair is described as silver blonde, and his black eye might just be a very dark purple. However, this ruins Tywin's last line of, You are no son of mine. Because Tyrion is Tywin, just small. So, making Tyrion a Targaryen, Lena Headey used a body double for her walk of shame in the final episode of season 5. Actress Rebecca Van Cleve performed the infamous walk of shame nude for 3 days, said, "It was one of the scariest, most wonderful, most gratifying experiences I could have imagined. I never in a million years would have thought I would be in Durbanik, surrounded by hundreds of extras and crew members throwing food at me. But it was amazing." There had been over 1,000 actresses who had applied for the role of Headey's double for the season's climatic episode. Lena Headey says she chose not to be nude for the 6-minute climax sequence for several reasons. Among them was that she was pregnant and felt that this fact would distract her from being able to deliver the powerful performance that the scene required. Lena Headey would walk Van Cleve through each shot, giving step-by-step insight into Cersei's mindset. Brian Cox, who plays Logan Roy in Succession and a pretty famous Hollywood actor, turned down the role of King Robert Baratheon in Game of Thrones because the pay wasn't good enough, and he knew that since Robert Baratheon died in the first season, he wouldn't be able to negotiate for a higher pay down the line. Brian Cox said, "Well, Game of Thrones went on to be a huge success, and everybody involved earned an absolute fortune, of course. But when I was originally offered, the money was not all that great. Moreover, Brian Cox probably wouldn't have been as funny as Mark Addy playing Robert Baratheon. Lastly, Brian Cox is nearly 20 years older than Mark Addy and 10 years older than Sean Bean, which might have made the friendship between the two old friends feel a little weird. However, Brian Cox would have definitely delivered an interesting take on the Robert Baratheon character compared to what Mark Addy gave us. Theon thinks he should have died at the Red Wedding with Robb Stark while in Winterfell for Ramsay's marriage to the fake Arya or Sansa Stark in the show. He observed some squires training, good training. It brought home how hard it was to fight your way up a spiral stair against determined opposition. So Roderick liked to say that one good man could hold 100 fighting down. That was long ago though. They were all dead now. Jory, old Sir Roderick, Lord Eddard, Harwin and Hullen, Cain and Desmond and Fat Tom, Alan with his dreams of knighthood, Micken who had given him his first real sword, even old Nan, like as not, and Robb who had been more of a brother to Theon than any son born of Balon Greyjoy's loins, murdered at the Red Wedding, butchered by the Freys. I should have been with him. Where was I? I should have died with him. This is actually so sad. And didn't have his head taken off by Daemon. Instead, as Corley took to his bed, the issue arose as to who should succeed him as Lord of the Tides and Master of Driftmark, should the sickness claim him. With both his trueborn children dead, by law, his lands and titles should pass to his eldest grandson, Jacaerys. But since Jace would presumably ascend the Iron Throne after his mother, Princess Rhaenyra urged her good father to name instead her second son, Lucerys. Lord Corlys also had half a dozen nephews, however, and the eldest of them, Sir Vaemond Valerion, protested that the inheritance by rights should pass to him, on the grounds that Rhaenyra's sons were bastards, sired by Harwin Strong. The princess was not slow in answering this charge. She dispatched Prince Daemon to see Sir Vaemond, had his head removed, and fed his carcass to her dragon, Syrax. When the hound collapses from his injuries, Arya thinks about killing him, but he beats her to it by saying, "You remember where the heart is?" he asked in a hoarse whisper. I was only... Don't lie. I hate liars. I hate gutless frauds even worse. Go on, do it. When Arya did not move, he said, "I killed your butcher's boy. I cut him near in half, and laughed about it after. And your pretty sister. I stood there in my white cloak and let them beat her. I meant to take her too. I should have. I should have left her bloody and ripped her heart out before leaving her for that dwarf." A spasm of pain twisted his face. "Do you mean to make me beg? Do it. Avenge your little Michael." "Micah." Arya stepped away from him. "You don't deserve the gift of mercy." Arya rode away from him and never looked back once. During Tyrion's trial, there was a moment when Kevan Lannister became sure of Tyrion's guilt in Joffrey's murder. After Pycelle testifies, Tyrion stole his poisons after throwing him into the Black Cells. We hear Tyrion think to himself, when his uncle called that night after supper, his manner was cold and distant. "He thinks I did it too." "Do you have witnesses for us?" Sir Kevan asked him. "Not as such. No. Unless you found my wife?" His uncle shook his head. "It would seem the trial is going very badly for you." Tyrion shifted in his seat. "I am curious. You're always a fair man, uncle. What convinced you? Why steal Pycelle's poisons, if not to use them?" Sir Kevan said bluntly. "Perhaps the time has come for you to confess. If you were to admit your guilt before the throne and repent of your crime, your father would withhold the sword. You would be permitted to take the black." Oberyn had the mountain impaled on the ground with his spear. However, this meant the Red Viper was without his trusted spear, and instead, he used the mountain's large, cumbersome sword. "Say the name." He put a foot on the mountain's chest and raised the greatsword with both hands. Whether he intended to hack off Gregor's head or shove the point through his eye slit was something Tyrion would never know. Clegane's hand shot up and grabbed the Dornishman behind the knee. The Red Viper brought down the greatsword in a wild slash. But he was off balance, and the edge did no more than put another dent in the mountain's vambrace. Then the sword was forgotten as Gregor's hand tightened and twisted, yanking the Dornishman down on top of him. They wrestled in the dust and blood, the broken spear wobbling back and forth. Tyrion saw with horror that the mountain had wrapped one huge arm around the prince, drawing him tight against his chest, like a lover before killing him. The singer Marillion, who was still alive and in the veil, nearly forces himself onto Sansa when he corners her in the bedroom. "Marillion?" she said, uncertain. "Pray forgive me, I am very tired and very beautiful." He sat on her bed, and his hand slipped up to her thigh. "Unhand me, you forget yourself. And yours, I know. There's no wench half so lustly as one bastard born." Sansa jerked away from him, frightened. "If you don't leave me, my father will hang you." "Littlefinger?" he chuckled. "Lady Lysa loves me well, and I am Lord Robert's favourite. If your father offends me, I will destroy him with a verse." He put a hand on her breast and squeezed. "Let's get you out of these wet clothes." Sansa heard the sound of steel on leather. "Singer," a rough voice said. "Best go if you want to sing again." The knife flashed. Marillion cried out, "You cut me!" "I'll do worse if you don't go." The Arya Stark actress was indoctrinated into an abusive cult by her father, and has left her feeling that there is something wrong with her. Sadly, she described it as such. "I, as a young child before the age of 8, had quite a traumatic relationship with my dad," explaining that her mum had gotten away from her father when she was just 4 months old. "And I don't really want to go into it too much, because it affects my siblings and my whole family. I think a lot of the traumatic things that were happening, I didn't realize that they were wrong." During this time, according to the actress, one of her school teachers flagged concerns about her home life. This resulted in Williams and her siblings being taken away by her mother. But Williams admits she tried to fight and defend her father, believing that her mother was just trying to take me away from my dad, but realizes now how unsafe she was. The 2019 finale of Game of Thrones became the most watched program ever for HBO, besting previous record holder The Sopranos, with a total viewership of 19.3 million. The show would also go on to win the most amount of Emmys in the history of the Emmy Awards, racking up 160 nominations and 59 wins. Because of this success, HBO commissioned a Targaryen series by Game of Thrones writer-producer Brian Cogman. However, then George R.R. Martin reached out to screenwriter and producer Brian J. Condell in September 2018 to come on board for the spin-off show. This is because Martin was unhappy with the overall direction of the Dance of the Dragon successor series, and he felt Condell would be an ideal collaborator on the project. "Ryan is a really good writer, and he knows fantasy, and he knows my world, Westeros, not only from watching Game of Thrones, but also from reading my books." After Cersei threatens to harm Ros, who she believes is Tyrion's whore, Tyrion returns to his bedchamber to find Shae cross-legged in his bed, nude but for the heavy golden chain that looped across the swell of her breasts. A chain of linked golden hands, each clasping the next. Tyrion had not expected her. "What are you doing here?" Laughing, she stroked the chain. "I wanted some hands on my but these little gold ones are cold." For a moment he did not know what to say. How could he tell her that another woman had taken the beating meant for her, and might well die in her place should some mischance of battle fell Joffrey? However, the gold chain that Shae is wearing is what the Hand of the King wears, and it is what Tywin puts around her neck after bedding her, and eventually what Tyrion will use to strangle her to death. Which shows how much George R.R. Martin loves to foreshadow. Did you know, in the books, Ned and Catelyn slept with each other after King Robert's welcoming feast in Winterfell? Catelyn describes it as such. "So, when they had finished, Ned rolled off her and climbed from her bed, as he had 1,000 times before. He crossed the room, pulled back the heavy tapestries, and threw open the high narrow windows one by one, letting the night air into the chamber. The wind swirled around him as he stood facing the dark, naked and empty-handed. Catelyn pulled the furs to her chin and watched him. He looked somehow smaller and more vulnerable, like the youth she had wed in the Sept at Riverrun, 15 long years gone. Her loins still ached from the urgency of his lovemaking. It was a good ache. She could feel his seed within her. She prayed that it might quicken there. It had been 3 years since Rickon. She was not too old. She could give him another son. In real life, Emilia Clarke, or Daenerys Targaryen, suffered a life-threatening stroke that nearly killed her between seasons 1 and 2 of Game of Thrones. that was ultimately caused by the stress and strain of becoming famous and her body being scrutinized over. She described it as, "I was terrified. Terrified of the attention, terrified of a business I barely understood, and the faith that the creators of thrones had put in me." This included the nudity required by Amuelia to perform in the first few seasons of the show. In the very first episode, I appeared naked, and from the first press junket onward, I always got the same question, some variation of, "You play such a strong woman, and yet you take off your clothes. Why?" Clarke says that she hit the gym more often, and this is where she first collapsed from an aneurysm. Though she was rushed to the hospital, Clarke discovered she would have to have immediate surgery at just 24. Ramsay Bolton doesn't marry Sansa Stark, but instead Sansa's childhood friend, Jean Poole, who the Boltons are pretending is Arya Stark. On their wedding night, Ramsay forces Theon to cut off her clothes and perform lewd sex acts on her before Ramsay her. There are scars on her back from being whipped, and later bruises from Ramsay's abuse. After this, no one sees or hears from her in weeks, as Stannis marches on Winterfell to rescue her. However, Theon helps her escape, and during this escape, we discover that Ramsay forces Jean to perform sexual acts for his dogs. She is so traumatized, she is too afraid to be rescued, and says to Theon, "Tell him, you tell him, I'll do what he wants, or whatever he wants, with him, or with the dog, or please, he doesn't need to cut off my feet. I won't try to run away. Not ever. I'll give him sons. I swear it. I swear it." Why did Jon and Arya just forgive Sansa for not telling them about the Vale army, since this cost thousands of Northern and Wildling men their lives, which could have been greatly minimized if the Vale army had just joined them from the start, and they had either besieged the Bolton forces inside Winterfell or faced them in the field with a numerical advantage. Also, how would Ramsay's scouts not tell him that an army had entered north? Like, how could this possibly escape his notice? Honestly, the show kind of played it as a great moment for Sansa, but how could Arya and Jon ever go about trusting Sansa again when she withheld this crucial information from them? The show should have doubled down on having a Stark-on-Stark rivalry for Winterfell, instead of hinting at an Arya-Sansa or Jon-Sansa conflict without actually doing anything with it. Especially when afterwards, you have Arya calling Sansa the smartest person she knows. We see glimpses of how Ned Stark made Jon Snow into a good man when Jon tells Sam not to be afraid north of the wall. We're all scared. We'd be fools if we weren't. He still saw the white in his dreams, dead Othor with the burning blue eyes and the cold black hands. But that was the last thing Sam needed to be reminded of. There's no shame in fear. My father told me, what matters is how we face it. And later, when it comes time to execute Ygritte, Jon thinks to himself, my father never used a headsman. He said he owed it to the men he killed to look into their eyes and hear their last words. And when I looked into Ygritte's eyes, Jon stared down at his hands helplessly. I know she was an enemy, but there was no evil in her. However, this decision allowed Jon to infiltrate the Wildlings and become Lord Commander. Biter, one of the two guys in the wheelhouse cell with Jaqen in Season 2, Episode 2, nearly eats Brienne. Biter tackles her from behind and gets on top of her. Biter's mouth gaped open, impossibly wide. She saw his teeth, yellow and crooked, filed into points. When they closed on the soft meat of her cheek, she hardly felt it. I cannot die yet, she told herself. There is something I still need to do. Biter's mouth tore free, full of blood and flesh. He spat, grinned, and sank his pointed teeth into her flesh again. This time he chewed and swallowed. He is eating me, she realized. But she had no strength left to fight him any longer. She felt as if she were floating above herself, watching the horror as if it were happening to some other woman, to some stupid girl who thought she was a knight. It will be finished soon, she told herself. Then it will not matter if he eats me. Sean Bean, who plays Ned Stark, was reading the first A Song of Ice and Fire book, A Game of Thrones, before filming his scenes. Both Maisie Williams, who plays Arya Stark, and Sophie Turner, who plays Sansa, confirmed that Sean would be seen reading the book on set before doing his scenes to get inside the head of Ned Stark. But which honestly explains why his performance was so great. Also, when Ned Stark was being executed, Sean Bean chose to have Ned quietly murmur a prayer to himself, since he thought to himself, this is what someone like Ned would do before having his head taken off, rather than fight or try to run away or say nothing at all. Lastly, Sean Bean has a Northern English accent, so Kit Harington, Maisie Williams, and Richard Maiden put on more of a Yorkshire accent to try and match their father, while Bran and Sansa put on more of a Southern accent to sound like their mother. The website What Culture ranked the 11 worst characters from the Game of Thrones show, and here they are. At 11, they put Shae, saying the actress did not provide the warmer and more emotional performance required to play alongside Tyrion. 10 was Ilaria Sand, who is a good actress from Rome and was okay in Season 4, but her performance went downhill from Season 5 onwards. 9 was Brienne, but this choice only applies to Season 2. 8 was Tommen Baratheon. 7 was Ian White, or the first Gregor Clegane from Season 1 of the show. 6 was Xaro, who wasn't a great villain, and Marasha Ali auditioned for Xaro, which would have been better. 5 was Hizdahr zo Loraq. 4 was the first Daario Naharis, actor who was also terrible in Deadpool. 3, Lancel Lannister. 2, Loras Tyrell, who they complain keeps getting acting work. And 1 was the Sand Snake actresses. Do you agree with this list? It took 25 days to film the battle for Winterfell between Jon Snow and Ramsay Bolton, and the scene where the Bolton cavalry is charging towards Jon was completely real and comprised of 40 horses. Sadly, you can tell as Jon pulls out his sword that it isn't a real sword, but otherwise the visuals are incredible. In total, 80 horses were used for the battle sequence. Next, it took 10 hours to film Jon Snow punching Ramsay Bolton, and the director of the episode said, "We spent an entire day with Kit on top of Ewan beating him. I just shot it from every single angle I possibly could." Moreover, it also took 13 takes to shoot Sansa's final smirk as she walks away from Ramsay, being devoured by his dogs. Lastly, the production team had a different ending for the battle, but with so much rain, they were forced to end the battle with the claustrophobic scene of Jon fighting to escape the pile of bodies. The recasting of Daario Naharis on Game of Thrones was very confusing for audiences, with Mikael Huisman taking over from Ed Skrein in Season 4. Ed Skrein originally planned to play Daario for the long term, but politics led to his departure from the show, allowing Huisman to take over the role. In an interview via EW, Skrein explained that the change came as a result of his role in the 4th Transporter movie. "My plan was to stay with Game of Thrones for the long haul. That was always my plan. I would have loved to. It was a wonderful experience. But politics led to us parting ways." Sadly, the English actor Ed Skrein leaving Game of Thrones for the Transporter Refueled series ended up being a bad decision, since besides being in 2016's Deadpool, his career has not flourished compared to that of Mikael Huisman, who has been on The Haunting of Hill House and Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon. Matt Smith, the 39-year-old former Doctor Who star who plays Daemon Targaryen, has said that he finds himself asking while on set for House of the Dragon, do we need another scene? And he is not the only one. Gemma Whelan, who played Asha Greyjoy, said that in Season 6, while filming scenes, it was a frenzied mess, as there was no intimacy coordinators on set. They used to just say, when we shout action, go for it. But between the actors, there was always an instinct to check in with each other. Alfie, or Theon Greyjoy, was very much, is this okay? How are we going to make this work? She remembered. There was a scene in a brothel with a woman and she was so exposed, but the director would just say, bit of boob biting, then slap her bum and go. However, without intimacy coordinators, there was no proper permission or consent on set. Cersei asked Taena Merryweather, a beautiful lady in waiting to her. Cersei cupped the other woman's breast, softly at first. When she glanced up, Tanya's eyes were open. Does that feel good? She asked. Yes, said Lady Merryweather. And this? Cersei pinched the nipple now, pulling on it hard, twisting it beneath her fingers. The Myrish woman gave a gasp of pain. You're hurting me. She twisted Tanya's other nipple too, pulling until the other woman gasped. I am the queen. I mean to claim my rights. Do what you will. Tanya's hair was as black as Robert's. Please, the Myrish woman said. Go on, my queen. Do as you will with me. I'm yours. However, after Cersei is done, she says, leave me. Cersei rolled away and pulled up the bedclothes to cover herself, shivering. It would be morning soon, and all of this would be forgotten. it had never happened, which is Cersei pretending she didn't force herself on this other woman. Barristan Selmy saved Dontas Hollard's life when he was just a small baby, who, ironically, would go on to help murder Joffrey, a king that Barristan had been sworn to protect. Dontos was the son of Sir Stefan Hollard and the only surviving member of House Hollard, because they had been close allies of House Darkland. When the Mad King Aerys Targaryen was taken captive by House Darkland during the Defiance of Duskendale, and later rescued in the night by Barristan Selmy, both houses were destroyed and their bloodlines wiped out. Only young Dontas was spared, because Sir Barristan Selmy asked for clemency, and the Mad King could scarcely deny his request after saving his life. Barristan Selmy looks back at the Defiance of Duskendale as one of his greatest triumphs, but recognizes at the same time, had Aerys died in captivity, Rhaegor would have been king after him, and maybe that would have been better for the realm. If Jon Snow is resurrected in the books, like he was in the show, will Melisandre try and sleep with Jon to create shadow babies like she did with Stannis? So, in the books, Melisandre never sleeps with Jon, like we saw in Season 5, Episode 4, where the showrunners had Melisandre try and sleep with Jon, only for him to tell her that he still loves Ygritte. A reason why George R.R. Martin probably didn't have a scene similar to this is because in the books, Jon is 15, even though the show had Melisandre do exactly this with Gendry, but the actor playing Gendry was 25 at the time. But an adult woman trying to seduce a 15-year-old on camera would be really uncomfortable. However, book Melisandre trying to seduce Jon Snow for his king's blood does make sense, but she would only do it for the king's blood and would not at all resemble what we saw in the show. Beesbury's death was way better than what we got in the show, which was kind of dumb. Moments before Beesbury's death, he said, "I am an old man, but not so old that I will sit here meekly while the likes of you plot to steal her crown." And so saying, he rose to go. As to what happened next, our sources differ. Grand Maester Orwyle tells us that Lord Beesbury was seized at the door by the command of Sir Otto Hightower and escorted to the dungeons. He would in time perish of a chill whilst awaiting trial. Septon Eustace tells it elsewise. In his account, Sir Criston Cole forced Lord Beesbury back into a seat and opened his throat with a dagger. Mushroom charges Sir Criston with his lordship's death as well, but in his version, Cole grasped the old man by the back of his collar and flung him out a window to die impaled upon the iron spikes in the dry moat below. Any of these three deaths would have been better. This is what was going through Jon Snow's head when he lost his I have no choice. If I refuse her, she will know me for a turncloak. His body had played the part eagerly enough. His hand sliding under her doeskin shirt rubbed her mound against him, remembering the weirwood. But her fingers were undoing his laces and her hand slipped inside his small clothes and brought him out. And he could not see the weirwoods anymore, only her. Afterwards, Jon tried to remind himself, I am playing a part. I had to do it once. I had to make her trust me. It happened twice more that night. Tyrion has a dwarf girlfriend named Penny with him on his way to find Daenerys. People wonder why George included this, but fans interpret her as basically the Brienne to Tyrion's Jaime. Penny helps Tyrion try to regain his moral compass after murdering both his father and Shae, just as Brienne's sense of duty and knighthood inspired Jaime during their adventures across the Riverlands. However, unlike Jaime, who was a good person at heart, Tyrion is too broken and traumatized to take on what Penny tries to teach him. Penny also exists to call out Tyrion's privilege, because even though he is a dwarf, most dwarfs aren't born into wealthy and powerful houses. The last we see of Tyrion and Penny is them getting ready to fight in the battle against the Wise Masters while waiting for Daenerys to return. In a blood-fueled rage, Tyrion even thinks about killing Penny. Cersei Lannister's decision to execute Missandei was so dumb and short-sighted that it makes no sense. Missandei was a trusted advisor to Daenerys Targaryen and held significant influence over her decisions. By killing Missandei in such a public and brutal manner, Cersei not only enraged Daenerys, but also removed her only leverage to prevent Daenerys from attacking King's Landing with her dragon. Not only that, but Missandei's death would push Daenerys to show Cersei no mercy after it. Whereas if Cersei had kept her alive and unharmed, Daenerys might have been willing to do the same for Cersei and her unborn child. Which, in episode 5, is exactly what Cersei asked for when she tells Jaime that she wants her and their baby to live. Why didn't she trade the city and Missandei in exchange for Castle Rock? Honestly, it just doesn't make any sense, and is just an example of the show doing things for shock value without thinking through the consequences. Unbelievably, all the houses in the Reach are related to each other. For example, Sam and Shireen are second cousins, with both of their mothers being from House Florent, since their mothers are cousins to each other. Now, Margaery Tyrell's grandmother on her mother's side is a Florent, meaning she and Sam are also second cousins. Not only that, but Marjorie's mother is a Hightower, and if Jorah is legally still married to Lannesi Hightower, he is also Marjorie's uncle. Next, Edric Storm, King Robert Baratheon's bastard son that Stannis and Melisandre meant to burnt for his king's blood, not Gendry like in the show, was fathered by Robert on a Florent girl, meaning him and Shireen are related. So Stannis was planning to burn someone that was related to his daughter, Marjorie, and Samwell. Also, Marjorie's mum is a Hightower, but she has silver hair, which is interesting when Bran Stark is at the council to decide who should be king of Westeros, and Tyrion gives his awful "who has a better story than Bran the Broken" speech. Bran replies with the line, "Why do you think I came all this way?" as to suggest he knew this was going to happen. But if he knew this was going to happen, it stands to reason he knew Daenerys was going to go crazy and burn down King's Landing, but did nothing to try and stop it, but instead might have actually facilitated in Daenerys' downfall by telling Sam that Jon is the prince that was promised, since all this does is contribute to Daenerys' spiral into madness. Not only that, but Bran gives no warning to prevent Daenerys' dragon from dying north of the Wall or to Euron's fleet. Honestly, the only thing that could have saved the Game of Thrones ending would be the revelation that Bran planned it all in his pursuit to become King of Westeros. King Robert I Baratheon got a Florent girl called Delaena pregnant on the night of Stannis Baratheon's wedding to Selyse Florent, who was Delaena's cousin, and they did it in Stannis' wedding bed. This coupling produced Edric Storm. Stannis saw this as an insult to his honor, so he sent Edric to Storm's End to foster with the boy's other uncle, Renly Baratheon. As Delaena was a noblewoman, Edric was acknowledged by Robert and raised in relative comfort at Storm's End. However, after Stannis kills Renly and takes Storm's End, Melisandre tries to persuade him to give the boy over to the fires. At first, Stannis resists, but after Edric is leeched 3 times, not Gendry like we saw in the show, and the deaths of Robb Stark, Balon Greyjoy, and Joffrey Baratheon all occur, Stannis becomes convinced he must burn the boy to wake stone dragons. Tyrion will always defend his family, even when he is planning to kill half of them. When Tyrion escapes King's Landing, it is not Varys he awakes to, but Illyrio Mopatis, who says of Tyrion, "You drink a deal of wine for such a little man. Kinslaying is dry work. It gives a man a thirst." There are those in Westeros who would say that killing Lord Lannister was merely a good beginning. They had best not say it in my sister's hearing, or they will find themselves short of tongue. And you had best be careful what you say of my family, Magister. Kinslayer or no, I am a lion still. That seemed to amuse the Lord of Cheese no end. You Westerosi are all the same. You sew some beast upon a scrap of silk, and suddenly you are all lions or dragons or eagles. Would you like to share a cage with them? Very well, Tyrion conceded. A Lannister is not a lion. Game of Thrones received a lot of scrutiny for its portrayal of female characters, with critics accusing the show of misogyny and gratuitous violence against women. While the series featured strong and complex female characters such as Daenerys, Cersei, and Arya, it also faced backlash for its frequent use of sexual violence as a plot device. Scenes depicting and abuse were used throughout for shock value and were sometimes accompanied with graphic depictions that were probably unnecessary. Additionally, the final season's treatment of Daenerys' descent into madness and Cersei's demise, whereas Jon, Tyrion, and most of the guys didn't get the same bad writing, except Jaime. So, is this a case of bad female representation, or just bad writing by having the two potential queens both be mad or cruel, and Jon as the only reasonable, level-headed person capable of ruling Westeros. We think it was just bad writing. Robb Stark probably died twice, once as himself and not long after as Grey Wind. The evidence for this comes from Varamir Sixskins, a powerful warg north of the Wall who describes something of a second life that wargs can experience after dying by transferring their consciousness to their animal in order to keep on living. Ironically, when both Jon and Robb Stark die, they whisper the name of their wolves before perishing. Jon says Ghost, and Robb says Grey Wind, meaning that the two of them blended their consciousness with their wolves, meaning that if Melisandre resurrects Jon's body, he might be able to walk out of Ghost and back into his original body, which is what the show should have done to explain Jon's resurrection. Unfortunately for Robb, his wolf was butchered shortly after his own death, meaning he had to experience death twice without any time to process what is happening, which is very depressing to think about. Sam and Gilly are sleeping together. Sam found himself kissing her back. I said the words, he thought, but her hands were tugging at his blacks, pulling at the laces of his breeches. He broke off the kiss long enough to say, "We can't," but Gilly said, "We can," and covered his mouth with her own again. He could taste the rum on Gilly's tongue, and the next thing, her chest was bare and he was touching them. I said the words, Sam thought again. If I do this, I am no better than Dareon, Sam thought. But it felt too good to stop. And suddenly his was out, jutting upward from his breeches like a fat pink mast. It looked so silly standing there that he might have laughed. But Gilly pushed him back onto her pallet, hiked her skirts up around her thighs, and lowered herself onto him. I am your wife now, she whispered. Theon is much better looking, with a lean, dark, handsome face with black hair. Like his show counterpart, he is always smiling and seems to find everything amusing. Theon has slept with numerous women in the books, including Kyra and Bessa of the Winter Town and a miller's wife along the Acorn Water. He lost his virginity to the brewer's wife in Winterfell's Godswood. He is known for his confidence and cocky smile. However, behind his promiscuous and vain attitude is a deeply insecure and lonely individual, torn between his identities as a Stark and Greyjoy. Maester Luwin describes Theon as so to Bran. Your Lord Father did what he could to gentle Theon, but I fear it was too little and too late. And Catelyn thinks of Theon as so. That young man had a way of looking as though he knew some secret jest that only he was privy to. Catelyn had never liked it. Cersei comments, when we were little, Jaime and I were so much alike that even our Lord Father could not tell us apart. Sometimes we were dressed in each other's clothes and spent a whole day as each other. Yet, when Jaime was given his first sword, there was none for me. What do I get? I remember asking. We were so much alike. I could never understand why they treated us so differently, and startled by how much differently men treated her when they thought that she was Jaime. Even Lord Tywin himself. Jaime learned to fight with sword and lance and mace, while I was taught to smile and sing and please. He was heir to Castle Rock, while I was to be sold to some stranger like a horse, to be ridden whenever my new owner liked, beaten whenever he liked, and cast aside in time for a younger filly. Jaime's lot was to be glory and power, while mine was birth and moonblood. Cersei's not wrong here. Ned Stark absolutely eviscerated King Robert when it came time to decide what they should do about Daenerys' unborn child. Lord Renly shrugged. The matter seems simple enough to me. We ought to have had Viserys and his sister killed years ago, but his grace, my brother, made the mistake of listening to Jon Arryn. Mercy is never a mistake, Ned replied. On the Trident, Sir Barristan here cut down a dozen good men, Robert's friends and mine. When they brought him to us, grievously wounded and near death, Roose Bolton urged us to cut his throat. But your brother said, I will not kill a man for loyalty, nor for fighting well, and sent his own maester to tend Sir Barristan's wound. He gave the king a long, cool look. Would that man were here today. Robert had shame enough to blush. It was not the same. Sir Barristan was a knight of the Kingsguard, whereas Daenerys is a 14-year-old girl. There is no possible way Grey Worm and Missandei could be in a romantic relationship. First of all, Missandei is like 11 and a sweet, innocent girl, while Grey Worm and the Unsullied have absolutely no desires towards women at all in the books. However, in the show, Missandei was aged up, and Grey Worm was only partly castrated, which goes against why the Unsullied are such a disciplined force in the books. However, within the context of the show, the betrayal of their love story was tender and heartfelt, emphasizing the emotional connection they shared rather than relying solely on physical intimacy, trust, and admiration. Additionally, the actors' chemistry and performances contributed significantly to the success with Jacob Anderson, Grey Worm, and Nathalie Emmanuel, Missandei, bringing genuine authenticity and vulnerability to their roles, which is impressive considering the story of a girl and eunuch falling in love could have been a lot worse. Even though Tormund's attraction for Brienne did have some funny moments, it got a bit dumb by the end, and really felt like a sitcom gimmick by the end that didn't belong in the high-concept, hyper-realistic show that Game of Thrones had been in the early seasons. For example, Tormund was attracted to Brienne because of her looks and that she was a knight, but didn't know a thing about her, whereas Brienne is attracted to genuine kindness, which is why she fell in love with Renly, because he was the first lord to ever actually be nice to her when others would shame her to her face and behind her back. He danced with her and treated her as a lady even though she was ugly and huge. Jaime did the same thing by revealing to her the truth of why he killed the Mad King and coming back to save her from the bear in the pit. Tormund needed to show her something similar. Daenerys Targaryen's decision not to attack King's Landing at the beginning of Season 7 can be seen as a strategic blunder for several reasons. Firstly, delaying the assault allowed Cersei Lannister to strengthen her position by securing alliances with the Greyjoys, which would somehow be used to wipe out Daenerys' Martell allies in a single night, making the task of taking King's Landing much more challenging. Whereas, if Daenerys had capitalized on her overwhelming military advantage early on, how could Cersei hold King's Landing against 3 dragons, Daenerys' Dothraki, and Unsullied besieging her? Even if Daenerys didn't take the city right away, the Tyrells and Martells could make their way to her by land and support her with food, whereas Cersei would starve inside King's Landing with only one Lannister army, and even if she got Randall Tarly, Sam's dad, to come to her aid, we saw what happened to him and the Lannister army when they faced just one of Daenerys' dragons. After the incident at the Trident, Arya was made to recount what happened. But unlike in the books, Renly was there and mocked Joffrey when hearing what happened. When Arya got to the part where she threw Joffrey's sword into the middle of the trident, Renly Baratheon began to laugh. The king bristled. "Sir Barristan, escort my brother from the hall before he chokes." Lord Renly stifled his laughter. "My brother is too kind. I can find the door myself." He bowed to Joffrey. "Perchance later you'll tell me how a 9-year-old girl the size of a wet rat managed to disarm you with a broom handle and throw your sword in the river." As the door swung shut behind him, Ned heard him say, "Lion's tooth," and laughed once more. Prince Joffrey was pale. Now, the show didn't have Renly here, but instead had King Robert tell Joffrey in front of everyone, "You let this little girl disarm you?" Which is just as funny. In George R.R. Martin's 1994 version of A Game of Thrones, Cersei did poison Jon Arryn, like Ned suspected her of doing, and probably used Sir Hugh to poison the Old Hand of the King, and then had the Mountain kill Sir Hugh on purpose, like Ned thought. The proof of this comes from Cersei and Jaime's talk that Bran overhears, where Cersei says, "Whatever the Arryn woman suspects, she has no proof, or does she?" Which suggests that Cersei has committed a crime and there might be proof that Lysa could use to implicate her. And then Cersei says, regarding Lysa protecting her children, "Do you think she will do any less for hers than I did for mine?" Which sounds a lot like Cersei killed Jon Arryn to protect her children with Jaime, whereas in the original 1996 series, Cersei didn't kill Jon Arryn and instead it was Lysa acting on the instructions of Littlefinger. Maybe George realized that having Cersei be the culprit was a bit too obvious. In George's original 1994 draft, it wasn't Catelyn's idea to seize Tyrion, but something Ned Stark instructed her to do when they were together in King's Landing and discovered that the dagger belonged to Tyrion. However, Ned's instructions were to seize Tyrion while in the north, which is why Catelyn thinks to herself in this original chapter, "We've come too late," Catelyn thought grimly. "The imp has slipped through our grasp." Or had he? Then, a few paragraphs later, when Tyrion has identified Catelyn at the inn of the crossroad, Catelyn thinks to herself. As Catelyn rose slowly to her feet, she heard Sir Roderick curse. If only the man had lingered at the wall, she thought. If only they could have taken him in the north as Ned had planned. If only. Reddit user GSteph, who went to the Cushing Library to find all this incredible stuff, reckons this was done to keep Ned Stark likable, since readers wouldn't like him if he ordered the seizure of Tyrion. After the Battle of the Blackwater, Sansa hangs out with Marjorie's ladies-in-waiting, and she quickly realizes that she has nothing in common with them anymore, despite being the same age. They are children, Sansa thought. They are silly little girls, even Eleanor. They've never seen a battle, they've never seen a man die. They know nothing. Their dreams were full of songs and stories. The way hers had been before Joffrey cut her father's head off. Sansa pitied them. Sansa envied them. Marjorie was different though, sweet and gentle, yet there was a little of her grandmother in her too. Then one of Marjorie's cousins says, "King Joffrey has such beautiful lips." Mega gushed, oblivious. "Oh, poor Sansa, how your heart must have been broken when you lost him. Oh, how you must have wept." "Joffrey made me weep more often than you know," she wanted to say, but didn't. After many slights from the Mad King, Lord Tywin ignored calls to arms from Mad King Aerys II Targaryen, but also didn't answer Robert's call to war. Tywin took no side until after the Battle of the Trident, in which Robert Baratheon slew Rhaegar. After this, Tywin rode from Castle Rock to the capital of King's Landing. After Aerys was convinced by Pycelle that Tywin had come to aid him, the king ordered the gates of the city opened for Tywin. His Westermen proceeded to sack the city. However, Aerys was killed by Sir Jaime Lannister before Tywin's forces arrived at the Red Keep. But Gregor Clegane and Armory Lorch, knights sworn to Tywin and under his orders, slew Rhaegar's wife, Elia Martell, and her two younger children, Rhaenys and Aegon. Tywin wrapped the bodies in crimson Lannister cloaks to better conceal the blood and presented them to Robert as a token of fealty. Stannis meant to attack King's Landing right away at the start of Season 2 or Book 2 and not kill Renly, which would have probably worked since the capital was not at all prepared to face 5,000 men under the command of Stannis Baratheon. However, he didn't do this because Melisandre told him about a vision she had. Stannis tells Davos, "Melisandre saw another day in her flames as well. A morrow where Renly rode out of the south in his green armor to smash my host beneath the walls of King's Landing. Had I met my brother there, it might have been me who died in place of him." However, Stannis thinks he averts this vision by attacking Renly at Storm's End and killing him. Unfortunately for him, Stannis' army is smashed against the walls of King's Landing just like Melisandre predicted. But it wasn't Renly wearing the green armor, but Garland Tyrell, meaning that Stannis trying to prevent this future from taking hold is what caused it to happen. Kit Harington, who plays Jon Snow, has come out and said that seasons 5 and 6 was the most difficult time of his life. He said, "My darkest period was when the show seemed to become so much about Jon, when he died and came back. I really didn't like the focus of the whole show coming onto Jon. It wasn't a very good time in my life," Harrington said. "I felt I had to feel that I was the most fortunate person in the world, when actually I felt very vulnerable. I had a shaky time in my life around there, like I think a lot of people do in their 20s. That was a time when I started therapy and started talking to people. I had felt very unsafe, and I wasn't talking to anyone. I had to feel very grateful for what I have, but I felt incredibly concerned about whether I could even act." Anyway, subscribe for more. Littlefinger had Sansa's best friend turned into a prostitute and then given to the Boltons to be a fake Arya Stark. So, Jean Poole is an attractive girl with brown eyes and dark hair. She mocks Arya and calls her Arya Horseface, but is fond of Sansa's brother, Robb Stark, and thinks the Stark ward, Theon Greyjoy, is handsome. After Ned's failed coup, Jean is given to Littlefinger by Cersei. When being married to Ramsay, he asks Jean if she knows how to please a man, and Jean replies fearfully that she has been trained, which implies that she has been kept in one of Peter Baelish's brothels. Jean begs Theon to rescue her. "Help me, please. I used to watch you in the yard, playing with your swords. You were so handsome. If we ran away, I could be your wife, or your whore. Whatever you wanted, you could be my man." Theon considers cutting Jean's throat to end her misery. but he is too fearful to do so. The riot of King's Landing was way worse than the fat High Septon being ripped apart limb by limb by the mob, like we saw in the TV show. However, it takes a day to find Sir Preston Greenfield, one of the Kingsguard, because everyone is looking for a knight clad head to toe in white, but he was hacked and stabbed to death so much that his white had all turned to brown and red. Sir Aaron Santigar, the Master-at-Arms from Dawn, has his head bashed in with cobblestones. Lolly Stokeworth, the Lady Bronn marries in Season 5, Episode 2, is found later after being gang half 100 times. Tyrick Lannister, who was Kevin Lannister's second son after Lancel, goes missing, and Jaime suspects that Varys kidnapped him and knew about the riot ahead of time. However, it might have also been Littlefinger who planned it, since the incident that started the riot of a woman with her supposedly dead baby seems kind of staged. Game of Thrones was plagued throughout its run with calls that its portrayal lacked diversity, and now with House of the Dragon there are calls that there is too much diversity. So which is it? Game of Thrones faced criticism for its predominantly white cast and limited representation of people of colour, and only showcased people of colour when it came to cultures that enforced slavery as seen in Essos. However, this isn't really the show's fault, and George R.R. Martin does have interesting people of colour in his books, like Jalaba Zoe, Mikoro, Brown Ben Plum, Kuhura Mo, and Alleris, who sadly all four were cut from the show. Now, were these characters cut because they were black? Unlikely. It probably had to do with cutting as many unnecessary book characters as possible, which started in Season 1 of the show. And to compensate, the show had white characters from the books made black, like Salador Saan and Xaro. Jaime had barely any relationship with Joffrey, and this is because Cersei told him. How would it look? His sister warned him. Bad enough Joff looks like you without you mooning over him. Jaime yielded with hardly a fight. The boy had been a squalling pink thing who demanded too much of Cersei's time, Cersei's love, and Cersei's breasts. Robert was welcome to him. Jaime had seen him born while Robert was hunting, but Jaime had never held him, and now he's dead. Jaime pictured Joff lying still with a face black from poison and still felt nothing. Perhaps he was the monster they claimed. If the Father above came down to offer him back his son or his hand, Jaime knew which he would choose. He had a second son after all, and seed enough for many more. If Cersei wants another child, I'll give her one, and this time I'll hold him. Robert was rotting in his grave, and Jaime was sick of lies. Julian Clover, who plays Grand Maester Pycelle, was a last-minute replacement, and the original actor was supposed to appear in the pilot episode of Game of Thrones and was portrayed by Roy Dotrice, a close friend of author George R.R. Martin, who has also narrated the audiobooks for A Song of Ice and Fire. However, due to health issues, Dotrice had to step down from the role before filming began. Dotrice has later made a guest appearance in Season 2, playing Chief Pyromancer Helene. Roy Dotrice also holds the Guinness World Record for the most character voices by an individual for an audiobook for his work doing over 70 characters in A Song of Ice and Fire. He also won a Tony Award and a British Academy Television Award. Sadly, his family said he passed away surrounded by family at 94 in his London home. Margaery wasn't arrested for covering up her brother's salacious affairs, but rather because on Maiden's Day, Margaery fasts and purifies herself. This then inspires Cersei, who orders Sir Osney Kettleback to confess to the High Sparrow that he had slept with Margaery, Eleanor, and Megha while Alla watched. Osney goes to falsely confess, and Margaery and her cousins are arrested by the Faith. Her clothes are taken, and she is given a rough spun shift to wear. Margaery is separated from her cousins and visited every hour by a Septa, even during the night, who asks Margaery confess her fornications. Septa Moel examines Margaery and finds that a maidenhead has been broken. Moel reports this at court, where Pycelle adds how he provided moon tea for Margaery on several occasions. Cersei has several men at court arrested for having affairs with Margaery. However, the small folk who love Queen Margaery gather before the Great Sept to protest Margaery's arrest. Peter Dinklage almost turned down the role of Tyrion Lannister because, as he says in his own words, "I had one hesitation because of the fantasy genre," I told showrunner David Benioff. I didn't want a really long beard and pointy shoes, Dinklage said. Dave and Dan assured me this character and this world wasn't that. They told me about his complexity, the fact that he wasn't a hero or a villain, that he was a womanizer and a drinker, and they painted a flawed and beautiful portrait of him. So I signed on. However, after the pilot was picked up, David Benioff pranked Peter Dinklage by calling him and telling him the show had been cancelled. It took 6 hours before Dinklage learned the truth, but was a good sport because the Tyrion actor was known for playing pranks on set. Daenerys places unquestioning faith in Missandei, but can she actually trust her? Well, there is a crazy theory that Missandei is a children of the forest because despite being 11 years old, she can speak 19 languages and is way too wise for someone her age. Not only that, but she has golden eyes that even Daenerys describes as so. Her eyes were queer, large and liquid, gold and green, slitted like a cat's eyes. No one has eyes like that. This might be because she is half human and half children of the forest, which is why she lives among the humans. Not only that, but Bran describes Leaf from Bloodraven's cave as having a sweet voice that sounds like music. Meanwhile, Missandei is also described as having a sweet, singing voice. Missandei states that she was taught to climb trees when she was very little by her brother and seemed to have lived in an environment that sounds like a forest. Tyrion actually confessed to killing Joffrey after being freed from his cell by Jaime and learning that his first wife, Tysha, wasn't a whore like Jaime had told him she was. Jaime says, "I gave you the truth. You owe me the same. Did you kill Joffrey?" "Are you sure you want to know?" asked Tyrion. Joffrey would have been a worse king than Aerys ever was. He stole his father's dagger and gave it to a footpad to slit the throat of Bran Stark. Did you know that? I thought he might have. Well, a son takes after his father. Joff would have killed me as well, once he came into his power. You have not answered my question. You poor, stupid, blind, crippled fool. Must I spell every little thing out for you? Very well. Cersei is a lying whore. She's been Lancel and Osmond Kettleback, and probably Moonboy for all I know. And I am the monster they all say I am. Yes, I killed your vile son. In the 1993 and 1994 drafts of A Game of Thrones, Dany didn't receive her dragon eggs as wedding presents from Illyrio Mopatis, but instead discovered them after Khal Drogo, who was eviler in this version, killed Viserys because he had no intentions of ever helping him reclaim the Seven Kingdoms and planned to keep Daenerys for himself. Therefore, Daenerys kills Khal Drogo and flees from the Dothraki into the wilderness beyond Vaes Dothrak. There, in a cave, she discovers a cache of dragon eggs. This version is quite interesting, but we prefer Khal Drogo actually being a good guy over this version of him. Also, Viserys' demise being of his own doing feels more apt to his character. Next, the dragon eggs hatching from Khal Drogo's funeral pyre is such a memorable end to the book that we definitely prefer the version George R.R. Martin went ahead with. This is what Jaime told Brienne after hearing of Joffrey's death. Jaime thought to himself, men were supposed to curse the gods and swear red vengeance when their sons died. So why was it that he felt so little? Stubbornly, Brienne persisted. Joffrey was my king. Leave it at that. You say Sansa killed him. Why protect her? Because Joff was no more to me than a squirt of seed in Cersei's and because he deserved to die. Cersei admits to Sansa that if it were anyone else besieging the capital, she might have a chance at seducing them to secure her own safety. But not with Stannis Baratheon. Cersei admits, pretty things like that serving wench of Lady Tanders, i.e. Shae, could be in for a lively night. But don't imagine the old and the infirm and the ugly will be spared. Sansa is horrified. You're a woman now, remember? And betrothed to my firstborn. Were it anyone else outside the gates, I might hope to beguile him. But this is Stannis Baratheon. I'd have a better chance of seducing his horse. She noticed the look on Sansa's face and laughed. Have I shocked you, my lady? She leaned close. You little fool. Tears are not a woman's only weapon. You've got another one between your legs, and you'd best learn to use it. You'll find men use their swords freely enough. Both kinds of swords. In George's original 1993 draft of A Game of Thrones, there was a plague infesting most of Westeros, including King's Landing at the start of the story, and the former Hand of the King, Jon Arryn, was killed by it, or so it was made to look like he did. Moreover, instead of Howland Reed, it was Jon Arryn who accompanied Ned to the Tower of Joy and found him after Lyanna died, which means he would know that Jon Snow is the son of Rhaegar Targaryen. However, in this version, Ned has no recollection of Lyanna's death, and her "promise me" line doesn't exist, so either George hadn't thought to foreshadow Jon's parentage in that way, or maybe it didn't exist yet, and Jon Snow was just Ned's illegitimate son. So the plague that George removed probably will come to Westeros in the Winds of Winter through Jon Connington or Daenerys' invasion, since it could either be grayscale or a winter fever before the arrival of the White Walkers. When interrogating Jaime about who sent the cat's paw to kill Bran, she realizes it wasn't Jaime or the Lannisters like she suspected. She says to him, "So you gave your cat's paw a bag of silver to make certain Bran would never wake. Did I now?" Jaime lifted his cup and took a long swallow. "I won't deny we talked of it, but you were with the boy day and night. Your maester and Lord Eddard attended him frequently, and there were guards, even those damned direwolves. It would have required cutting my way through half of Winterfell, and why bother when the boy seemed like to die of his own accord? If you lie to me, this session is at an end. I may indeed have shit for honor, I won't deny it, but I have never yet hired anyone to do my killing. Believe what you will, Lady Stark, but if I had wanted your Bran dead, I would have slain him myself. Gods be merciful, he's telling the truth," she realized. Stannis thought Tywin was everything a king should be. When Melisandre is trying to convince Stannis to sacrifice Edric Storm to wake stone dragons, Stannis admits to her and Davos that it would be a wondrous thing to see stone come to life, he admitted grudgingly, and to mount a dragon. "I remember the first time my father took me to court. Robert had to hold my hand. I could not have been older than 4, which would have made him 5 or 6. We agreed afterward that the king had been as noble as the dragons were fearsome," Stannis snorted. "Years later, our father told us that Aerys had cut himself on the throne that morning, so his hand had taken his place. It was Tywin Lannister who'd so impressed us. Robert took the skulls down when he donned the crown, but he could not bear to have them destroyed. Dragon wings over Westeros." There is a theory Rhaenyra only married Daemon because she was pregnant with his son. So, less than 6 months after the deaths of Laena, Lenore, and Harwin, Rhaenyra secretly married her uncle Daemon at Dragonstone, seemingly because he was the most experienced warrior of his time and could ensure her ascension to the Iron Throne. Septon Eustace claimed the two had wed in secret to prevent Viserys from prohibiting the marriage, while Mushroom suggested that Daemon had already impregnated the princess and it was too long after Lenore's death to claim it was his. The news of their wedding caused a scandal at the court and made Rhaenyra's father livid. King Viserys angrily declared that a wedding so soon after the deaths of Daemon's wife and Rhaenyra's husband was an insult to their memories, and it took some time before Viserys and Daemon reconciled. After the death of King Viserys, Alicent dispatched the Kingsguard to collect her children. One-eyed Prince Aemond, 19, was found in the armory, donning plate and mail for his morning practice in the castle yard. "Is Aegon king?" he asked Sir Willis Fell, "or must we kneel and kiss the old whore's cunny?" Princess Helena was breaking her fast with her children when the Kingsguard came to her, but when asked about the whereabouts of Prince Aegon, her brother and husband, she said only, "He is not in my bed, you may be sure. Feel free to search beneath the blankets." Prince Aegon was at his revels in his true telling, vaguely. The testimony of Mushroom claims Sir Criston found the young king to be drunk and naked in a flea-bottom rat pit. where two gutter snipes with filed teeth were biting and tearing at each other for his amusement, whilst a girl who could not have been more than 12 pleasured his member with her mouth. There is no way Rhaenyra had a romantic relationship with both Daemon and Criston Cole at 16, let alone on the same night. But of course HBO had to choose between a scandalous Rhaenyra affair with either Daemon or Criston, and thought to themselves, why can't we do both? So technically what we see happens on screen might have happened in the books. But for Rhaenyra to be ping-ponging between Daemon and Criston Cole on the same night pushes any semblance of realism. According to Mushroom, Rhaenyra only went with Daemon onto the Street of Silk because she was in love with Criston Cole, and she wanted him to see her as a woman and so tried to learn the arts of seduction with Daemon. However, Mushroom claims that Rhaenyra remained a virgin during these lessons because she was saving herself for Criston Cole. They should have either had this or Rhaenyra trying to seduce Criston Cole, but not on the same night. Alicent actually had a third son that wasn't evil, unlike Aegon and Aemond. So Prince Daeron Targaryen was the youngest child of King Viserys Targaryen and Alicent Hightower. He was a handsome boy and the most popular of Alicent's sons because he was actually charming and a genuinely nice person, which honestly is exactly what the Greens lack at the moment in the show. However, in the books, this is because Daeron grew up in the shadow of his brothers, and therefore became more accustomed to following orders than giving them. Like his siblings, Daeron was a dragon rider, and he rode the she-dragon to Sarion. Why he had a she-dragon remains a mystery. Now, Daeron is in Oldtown during the start of the Dance of the Dragons because he had been sent there to be fostered. So there is a small chance that Season 2 could introduce him because he and his dragon do play a role in the fighting, so it'll be interesting to see what the show does. Stannis wanted to make Jon Lord of Winterfell and marry a beautiful wildling called Val. However, Jon refuses. But he probably wouldn't have made this decision if Ygritte was still alive, and would have married her, and the two of them could have been the Lady and Lord of Winterfell. Jon would have helped Stannis in his march on Winterfell, and together, they probably would have won, which would have resulted in Jon not becoming king in the north, but instead rally the north behind Stannis to then go march on the Lannisters with the wildlings supporting Jon and Ygritte, since their child would be half Stark and half wildling. This means that Jon would not have ended up with Daenerys, which is probably for the best. Also, Daenerys and Jon on opposite sides, with Stannis being Jon's king, would have been super interesting, especially if it came out that he has more of a claim to the Iron Throne than Stannis or Daenerys. Tywin sacked King's Landing after betraying King Aerys, but in all honesty, this made absolutely no sense, and here's why. Firstly, Tywin and his forces had been let into the city, so it wasn't a case that he had to force himself in. Pycelle had already tricked Aerys into letting Tywin in. Next, by sacking the city, Tywin risked Aerys killing Jaime in retribution after realizing that Tywin wasn't there to help him. Instead, Tywin should have demanded an audience with the king and maybe let it be known that unless Aerys made him Hand of the King, Tywin and his forces would leave, so Aerys wouldn't touch Jaime and think Tywin's motives are just that. Then, once in audience with Aerys and his men, Tywin could have betrayed him and quickly overwhelmed Aerys' Red Keep guards and Kingsguard with explicit orders no one hurts Jaime. So why did Tywin devastate the capital? It's so petty and stupid, and making everyone hate House Lannister afterwards. King Viserys wed his son Aegon to his daughter Helena. The groom was 15 years of age and described as a lazy and somewhat sulky boy, who was a glutton at table, given to swilling ale and strong wine, and pinching and fondling any serving girl who strayed within his reach. The bride, his sister, was but 13. Though plumper and less striking than most Targaryens, barely a year in 123 AC, the 14-year-old princess gave birth to twins. A boy she named Jaehaerys, and a girl called Jaehaerys. Prince Aegon had heirs of his own now, the Greens at court proclaimed happily. A dragon's egg was placed in the cradle of each child, and 2 hatchlings soon came forth. However, Alicent and the Green should have definitely married Aegon and Helena off to secure House Tyrell, the Vale, or Riverlands to secure them in the fight against the Black. Otto Hightower calls Daemon a second Maegor the Cruel, which ironically is true because if you look carefully, Maegor was always loyal to his brother and twice rose to his defense on his dragon, Balerion the Black Dread. Now, Maegor did war with his brother's children, but so will Daemon because they are usurpers who threaten the existence of House Targaryen by being cronies of House Hightower. The same way Maegor only warred against his nephews because they were too weak to protect House Targaryen from the Faith Militant, who were secretly being supported by House Hightower. Meanwhile, the two conflicts are very similar, and in both cases, Maegor and Daemon are portrayed negatively in the history books, despite always being loyal to their brothers and protecting Targaryen hegemony from Hightower scheming. But this is because the history books are written by the Maesters, who work with the Hightowers. Both Daemon and Maegor had multiple wives. When Samwell Tarly is at the Citadel, he is immediately let in on a conspiracy involving the Maesters who are secretly conspiring against the Targaryens and hate all things magic, including dragons. So we could have had Sam investigating this mystery and finding out that the Maesters are the one who killed off all the dragons the first time around and brought down House Targaryen. However, in the show, Samwell Tarly's time in the Citadel of Maesters was such a waste, because even if he didn't randomly find the paper proclaiming Jon to be a Targaryen, Bran could have just told everyone, and Jon being able to ride a dragon is probably evidence enough. Not only that, but in the books, the Faceless Assassins have stolen the face of a fellow acolyte and are using his face to infiltrate the Maesters. Sam becomes friends with him in the book, and this would have been so interesting. House Valyrian, like the Targaryens, are one of the only remaining houses with the blood of old Valyria in their veins. They allied with House Targaryen of Dragonstone and House Celtigar of Claw Isle, both houses of Valyrian descent. While the Valyrians and Celtigars dominated the middle reaches of the Narrow Sea with their ships, the Targaryens were dragon riders who ruled the skies with their dragons. During the conquest, House Valyrian allied with the Targaryens, and the Valyrian fleet transported Aegon the Conqueror's men across Blackwater Bay for Aegon's Landing. For the first century after the conquest, the position of Master of Ships was seen almost hereditary within House Valyrian, since Valyrian ships make up the bulk of the royal fleet. Aegon married his first son to Alyssa Valyrian, and together they produced Jaehaerys, the Old King from the start of episode 1 of House of the Dragons. Aegon and Helena's children, Jaehaera and Jaehaerys, are super deformed, with the text telling us that after they were born there was much celebration. Yet all was not well with these new twins. Jaehaera was tiny and slow to grow. She did not cry, she did not smile. Her brother, whilst larger and more robust, was also less perfect than was expected of a Targaryen princeling, boasting 6 fingers on his left hand and 6 toes upon each foot. A wife and children did little to curb the carnal appetites of Prince Aegon the Elder. If Mushroom is to be believed, he fathered 2 bastard children the same year as the twins. A boy on a girl whose maidenhood he won at an auction on the Street of Silk, and a girl by one of his mother's maidservants. And in 127 AC, Princess Helena gave birth to his second son, who was given a dragon's egg and the name Maelor. Daenerys spent her whole life thinking she would marry Viserys, and was quite perplexed that she was being married off, when, to her, Targaryens marrying brother to sister was what was normal. When Viserys and Daenerys wandered the free cities for years, they visited Myr, Tyrosh, Qohar, Volantis, and Lys. While at first they were welcomed by magisters and archons and merchant princes, with time their interest in the last Targaryens faded. Daenerys and Viserys had to sell their last few treasures, and eventually their mother's crown. Selling their mother's crown took the last of Viserys' joy, leaving only rage. Once when Daenerys and Viserys were on their way to Braavos by ship, Daenerys expressed interest to her brother how fine it would be to be a sailor. Angry, Viserys twisted her hair until she cried, because Viserys had often told her that their line must be kept pure. One of the best lines came straight from the books after Karstark killed the innocent Lannister prisoners. Robb says, "Great John, keep Lord Karstark here till I return, and hang the other 7. Even the dead ones?" let them feed the crows. One of the captives dropped to his knees. "Mercy, sire, I killed no one. I only stood at the door to watch for guards." Robb considered that for a moment. Did you know what Lord Rickard intended? Did you see the knives drawn? Did you hear the shouts, the screams, the cries for mercy? I did, but I took no part. I was only the watcher. I swear it. Lord Umber, said Robb. This one was only the watcher. Hang him last, so he may watch the others die. Outside, the thunder crashed and boomed, so loud it sounded as if the castle were coming down about their ears. Is this the sound of a kingdom falling? Catelyn wondered. Rhaenyra's eldest son Jace was a strapping boy who grew up to become a handsome teenager. He had brown hair and eyes and a pug nose just like his brothers Luke and Joffrey. Luke is described as being skilled in arms, even though the book implied very heavily that Rhaenyra's children are Harwin Strongs. The book never describes Harwin's hair color, and the only strong character we know of that gets a physical description has silver blonde hair, which makes sense for Rhaenyra to sleep with someone who might give her children that look like Lenore, since in the books, Lenore isn't black. Meanwhile, Rhaenyra's two youngest children with Daemon, Aegon and Viserys, have dark purple eyes which look almost black, and silver hair which was so pale that it was almost white. However, Aegon is described as better looking than Viserys, but not as intelligent. This is how Robb Stark defeated Jaime Lannister in the Battle of the Whispering Woods. Robb sends Brandon with a few hundred men carrying Tully banners to raid and draw Jaime from his camp at Riverrun. Expecting to crush a small force, Jaime and most of his cavalry are lured north of the Tumblestone to a fostered valley where the rest of Robb's men are hidden. Once all of Jaime's unsuspecting men have entered the valley, they are attacked on three sides and by bowmen hidden in the trees. Robb and his northern bannermen lead their own cavalry against the ambushed Westermen. Robb is joined in the fighting by his direwolf, Greywind. Theon kills men in the battle also. When Jaime sees the battle is lost, he rallies his retainers and attempts to cut his way through the host to slay Robb in single combat. He is halted, but not before slaying two Karstarks and a Hornwood in Robb's personal guard. Alicent was way more evil and more like Cersei or a twisted Marjorie Tyrell who never cared about anything but advancing the birthrights of her children, unlike her show counterpart. Originally, Queen Alicent, who was 10 years older than Rhaenyra, had a good relationship with her stepdaughter. But when Alicent gave birth to a son, Prince Aegon, a daughter, Princess Helena, and another son, Prince Aemond, in rapid succession, and Rhaenyra remained Viserys' heir, their amicable relationship started to deteriorate. Both women wanted to be the first lady of the realm, but there could only be one. Also, Otto wasn't forced to resign because of an old hunting accident involving Balon, but because he pushed too far on the matter of succession and Viserys stripped him of his position as Hand. Having no place at court anymore, Otto returned to Oldtown. Ned Stark called Robert a coward in front of his small council. Ned knew he was pushing this well past the point of wisdom, yet he could not keep silent. Robert, I ask you, what did we rise against Aerys Targaryen for, if not to put an end to the murder of children? To put an end to the Targaryens, the king growled. Your Grace, I never knew you to fear Rhaegar. Ned fought to keep the scorn out of his voice, and failed. Have the years so unmanned you that you tremble at the shadow of an unborn child? Robert purpled. No more, Ned, he warned, pointing. Not another word. Have you forgotten who was king here? No, Your Grace, Ned replied. Have you? Ned had heard enough. Do it yourself, Robert. The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. Look her in the eyes before you kill her. See her tears. Hear her last words. You owe her that much, at least. It wasn't Rhaenyra's idea to marry Lenore. Instead, Fire and Blood tells us the best choice, King and small council finally agreed, would be Rhaenyra's cousin Lenore Valyrion. Thus was the match decided. King and council had neglected to consult the princess, however, and Rhaenyra proved to be very much her father's daughter. The princess knew much and more about Lenore Valyrion, and had no wish to be his bride. My half-brothers would be more to his taste, she told the king, and though his grace reasoned with her, pleaded with her, shouted at her, and called her an ungrateful daughter, No words of his could budge her, until the king brought up the question of succession. What a king had done, a king could undo, Viserys pointed out. She would wed as he commanded, or he would make her half-brother Aegon his heir in place of her. At this, the princess's will gave way. The small council and Viserys were the ones to betroth Lenore to Rhaenyra. However, during the discussion, one objection was raised. Lenore Valerion was now 19 years of age, yet had never shown any interest in women. Instead, he surrounded himself with handsome squires of his own age, and was said to prefer their company. But Grand Maester Mellows dismissed this concern. "What of it?" he said. "I do not like the taste of fish, but when fish is served, I eat it." Now, it is theorized that Mellos is working for the Hightowers and knows by procuring this match for Rhaenyra, Lenore won't be able to get her pregnant with children, or, even if Rhaenyra has children, there will always be whispers that the children are not actually Lenore's, but bastards. This is another hint that the Maesters are trying to stir up a Targaryen civil war and kill all the dragons. Daenerys did a lot of preparation before eating the horse heart. For a week or two, Dany dined on bowls of half-clotted blood to accustom herself to the taste, and Irri made her chew strips of dried horseflesh until her jaws were aching. She then starved herself for a day and a night before the ceremony in the hopes that hunger would help keep down the raw meat. However, she describes the wild stallion's heart as all muscle and had to constantly chew each small mouthful until it was small enough to swallow. She even used her nails to try and rip it apart. Khal Drogo stood over her as she ate, his face as hard as a bronze shield. His long black braid was shiny with oil. She looked at him whenever she felt her strength failing. Towards the end, Dany thought she glimpsed a fierce pride in his dark, almond-shaped eyes, but she could not be sure. It wasn't Sam's speech that got Jon Snow elected Lord Commander, but instead, Othel Yarwyck, who was first builder at the Wall. He told his brothers, "I was going to say that those who were casting a token for me ought to choose Lord Janos." So Alliser nodded. "Lord Slint is the best possible." "I wasn't done, Alliser," Yarwyck complained. "Lord Slint commanded the city watch in King's Landing, we all know, and he was Lord of Harrenhal." "He's never seen Harrenhal," Cotter Pike shouted out. "Well, that's so," said Yarwyck. "Anyway, now that I'm standing here, I don't recall why I thought Slint would be such a good choice. That would be sort of kicking King Stannis in the mouth, and I don't see how that serves us. Might be Snow would be better. He's been longer on the wall, he's Ben Stark's nephew, and he served the old bear as squire." Yarwyck sat down. This is the real reason why Daemon Targaryen married Laena Velaryon. After growing wary of ruling the Stepstones, Daemon flew to High Tide. There his eye fell upon Lord Corley's daughter, Laena, a maid of 22, tall, slender, and surprisingly lovely. Even Mushroom described her beauty as almost as pretty as her brother. Prince Daemon fell in love with Laena, the singers would have us believe. Men of a more cynical bent believe the prince saw her as a way to check his own descent. Once seen as his brother's heir, he had fallen far down in the line of succession, and neither the Greens nor the Blacks had a place for him. But House Valyrian was powerful enough to defy both parties with impunity. Daemon Targaryen asked Lord Corlys for his daughter's hand in marriage. After killing her betrothed, Daemon wed Lady Laena Velaryon a fortnight later, abandoning his hardscrabble kingdom on the Stepstones. This was Jaime's reaction to Joffrey's death on his way back to King's Landing. Jaime sat silent through it all, letting the words wash over him. "Joffrey, my blood, my firstborn, my son." He tried to bring the boy's face to mind, but his features kept turning into Cersei's. She will be in mourning, her hair in disarray and her eyes red from crying, her mouth trembling as she tries to speak. She will cry again when she sees me, though she'll fight the tears. His sister seldom wept, but when she was with him, she could not stand for others to think her weak. Only to her twin did she show her wounds. She will look to me for comfort and revenge. However, could my brother truly have killed the boy? Jaime found that hard to believe. He was curiously calm. Men were supposed to go mad with grief when their children died, he knew. So why was it that he felt so little? Laena's death was more tragic than her being burned alive by her dragon as a last act of defiance against death. Instead, as her condition steadily worsened, despite the best efforts of Driftmark's young maester, Prince Daemon flew to Dragonstone and brought back Princess Rhaenyra's own maester, an older and more experienced man renowned for his skills as a healer. Sadly, Maester Gerardus came too late. After 3 days of delirium, Lady Laena passed from this mortal coil. She was but 27. During her final hour, it is said, Lady Laena rose from her bed, pushed away the scepters praying over her, and made her way from her room, intent on reaching Vhagar that she might fly one last time before she died. Her strength failed her on the tower's steps, however. Her husband, Prince Daemon, carried her back to her bed. So, unlike the show, she couldn't get her last wish before dying. Larys Clubfoot Strong was in the small council as Master of Whisperers when the Greens conspired to take Rhaenyra's crown. After Criston says, Rhaenyra will turn the Red Keep into a brothel. No man's daughter will be safe, nor any man's wife. Even the boys. We know what Lenore was. Lord Larys Strong spoke not a word during the debate, preferring to listen rather than talk. After the decision was made to kill anyone who opposes them, Larys Strong spoke up for the first and only time. Let us be the first to swear, he said, lest there be traitors here amongst us. Drawing his dagger, the Clubfoot drew it across his palm. A blood oath, he urged, to bind us all together, brothers unto death. And so each of the conspirators slashed their palms and clasped hands with one another, swearing brotherhood. Queen Alicent alone amongst them was excused from the oath, on account of her womanhood. Daemon and Rhaenyra didn't try to kill Lenore, since this is what really happened. Lenore was slain whilst attending a fair in Spicetown, stabbed to death by his friend and companion Sir Carl Corey. The two men had been quarrelling loudly before blades were drawn. Merchants at the fair told Lord Valyrion when he came to collect his son's body. Corey had fled by them, wounding several men who tried to hinder him. However, what was more likely is Lenore died because of a gambling debt caused by Carl, who was described as a household knight of relatively low birth, known to have a lord's tastes and a peasant's purse, and was given to extravagant wagering besides. So Carl and Lenore were quarreling about Carl's gambling debts, and the men who tried to hinder Carl were the debtors. And afterwards, they claimed it was Carl who killed Lenore to save themselves from Lord Corley's wrath, and properly disposed of Carl. House Bracken and House Blackwood, two ancient noble houses in the Riverlands, have a deep-seated enmity that spans generations, like we saw in episode 4 of season 1. The roots of their rivalry trace back to the territorial disputes over the Trident and Red Fork. Both houses lay claim to these fertile lands, leading to frequent conflicts over control and ownership. Under Aegon the Unworthy, he took both a Blackwood and a Bracken as his paramours to produce two sons, Brynden and Bittersteel, who would hate each other during the Blackfire rebellions. One of them would become Bran's teacher in the caves. They also worship different gods. House Blackwood follows the old gods, while House Bracken adheres to the faith of the Seven. The two families are super intermarried, but legends and tales of past betrayals, murders, and broken alliances have been passed down through generations, further fueling the hatred and distrust between the two families. This was Stannis Baratheon's reaction to the Red Wedding. For a moment, it seemed as though the king had not heard. Stannis showed no pleasure at the news, no anger, no disbelief, not even relief. He stared at his painted table with teeth clenched hard. "You are certain?" he asked. The Red Wedding is what the small folk are calling it. They swear Lord Frey had the boy's head hacked off, sewed the head of his direwolf in its place, and nailed a crown about his ears. His lady mother was slain as well, and thrown naked in the river. At a wedding, thought Davos. These Freys are cursed. It was the Lord's wrath that slew him, Sir Axel Florent declared. It was the hand of R'hllor, sang out Queen Selyse. Is the hand of R'hllor spotted and old? Asked Stannis. This sounds more Walder Frey's handiwork than any god's. But Melisandre interjects. R'hllor chooses such instruments as he requires. Jaime was absolutely hilarious when he told Catelyn that he threw Bran out of the window. Catelyn wondered if he would dare answer her next question with anything but a lie. How did my son Bran come to fall? I flung him from a window. The easy way he said it took her voice away for an instant. If I had a knife, I would kill him now, she thought, until she remembered the girls. You were a knight, sworn to defend the weak and innocent. He was weak enough, but perhaps not so innocent. He was spying on us. Bran would not spy. Then blame those precious gods of yours, who brought the boy to our window and gave him a glimpse of something he was never meant to see. Blame the gods? She said incredulously. Yours was the hand that threw him. You meant for him to die. His chains chinked softly. I seldom fling children from towers to improve their health. Yes, I meant for him to die. After Renly pitched to Eddard Stark that he needs to seize the Iron Throne now, Ned regarded him coldly. Robert is not dead yet. The gods may spare him. If not, I shall convene the council to hear his final words and consider the matter of the succession. But I will not dishonor his last hours on earth by shedding blood in his halls and dragging frightened children from their beds. Lord Renly took a step back. Every moment you delay gives Cersei another moment to prepare. By the time Robert dies, it may be too late for both of us. Then we should pray that Robert does not die. Small chance of that. Renly then flees the capital, and Ned thinks to himself, he had no taste for these intrigues, and there was no honor in threatening children. And yet, if Cersei elected to fight rather than flee, he might well have need of Renly's 100 swords. During the Red Wedding, Catelyn pledges House Stark will take no vengeance, but Lord Walder replies, "Only a fool would believe such blather. Do you take me for a fool? I take you for a father. Keep me for a hostage. Edmure as well, if you haven't killed him, but let Robb go." Sir Ryman and Black Walder were circling around her back, but Catelyn did not care. They could do as they wished with her, imprison her, her, kill her. It made no matter. She had lived too long, and Ned was waiting. It was Robb she feared for. She told Lord Walder, "I will trade your boy's life for Robb's. A son for a son." "A son for a son," he repeated. "But that's a grandson, and he was never much use." A man in dark armor and a pale pink cloak spotted with blood stepped up to Robb. Jaime Lannister sends his regards. He thrust his longsword through her son's heart and twisted. Corlys made an alliance with the Sea Lord of Braavos by promising his daughter Laena to the Sea Lord's son at the age of 12. However, the Sea Lord died before they could wed, and the son soon proved a wastrel and a fool, squandering his family's wealth and power before turning up on Driftmark. Lacking a graceful means to rid himself of the embarrassment, but unwilling to proceed with the marriage, Lord Corlys had repeatedly postponed the wedding. By now, Laena had grown into a beautiful woman. Corlys then might have arranged for Daemon to become smitten with his daughter in the hope of getting dragon-riding grandchildren. However, the exiled Braavosi son remained an impediment, but not for long. Daemon mocked him to his face so savagely, the boy had no choice but to call him to defend his words with steel. Armed with Darksister, the prince made short work of his rival and married Laena 2 weeks later. We don't actually know if Daemon said "heir for a day," and if he did, whether it was a mocking or solemn gesture, since Daemon never confesses to saying it in the book. When word of this got back to the king, legend says that it was the whore sitting in Daemon's lap who informed on him. But evidence suggests it was actually one of his drinking companions, a captain in the Goldcloaks eager for advancement which might be Harwin strong. Viserys became livid. Once his mourning for his wife and son had run its course, the king moved swiftly to resolve the issue of the succession. Disregarding the precedents set by King Jaehaerys in 92 AC, Viserys declared his daughter, Rhaenyra, to be his rightful heir in a lavish ceremony at King's Landing. Hundreds of lords did obeisance to the realm's delight as she sat at her father's feet at the base of the Iron Throne. Prince Daemon was not amongst them, however. Jaime thought about coming clean with his relationship with Cersei and marrying Joffrey to Marcella. Jaime thinks to himself, perhaps Stannis Baratheon and the Starks had done him a kindness, They had spread their tale of incest all over the 7 kingdoms, so there was nothing left to hide. Why shouldn't I marry Cersei openly and share her bed every night? The dragons always married their sisters. Septons, lords, and small folk had turned a blind eye to the Targaryens for hundreds of years. Let them do the same for House Lannister. It would play havoc with Joffrey's claim to the crown, to be sure. But in the end, it had been swords that had won the Iron Throne for Robert, and swords could keep Joffrey there as well, regardless of whose seed he was. We could marry him to Myrcella once we've sent Sansa Stark back to her mother. That would show the realm that the Lannisters are above their laws like gods and Targaryens. This is how Aemond Targaryen won House Baratheon to Aegon's cause. Prince Aemond had been uncertain what sort of welcome he would receive when he set out, but Storm's End welcomed him with feasts and hunts and jousting. Lord Boris proved more than willing to entertain his suit. "I have 4 daughters," he told the prince. "Choose any one you like. Cass is oldest. She'll be first to flower, but Floris is prettier. And if it's a clever wife you want, there's Maris." Rhaenyra had taken House Baratheon for granted for too long, his lordship told Aemond. We have no record of which daughter Prince Aemond finally decided on, though Mushroom tells us that he kissed all 4 to taste the nectar of their lips, save that it was not Maris. Munkin writes that the prince and Lord Boris were haggling over dates and dowries on the morning Lucas Valerion appeared. Khal Drogo is actually a very sophisticated warlord, whereas the show depicted him as a brute and savage, especially in the first 2 episodes where he is forcing himself on Daenerys repeatedly, which is so dumb and doesn't happen in the books. Because if Khal Drogo just wanted a bed slave, which is what he treats Daenerys like in the show at the start, he could have easily found any girl to do it and didn't need to marry them. But Book Khal Drogo sought her out so he could have a prince that was promised, or a stallion who mounts the world. And obviously, if you are trying to create a prophesized savior, you don't abuse the mother of your child and make her not want to live. Instead, you do exactly what Book Khal did, which was treat her kindly and respectfully, and it wasn't Drogo that made Daenerys super depressed on the Dothraki Sea, but the constant riding and horse meat which Drogo can't really control since that's their lifestyle. Walder Frey mocked Robb Stark before killing him at the Red Wedding. Robb staggered suddenly as a quarrel sprouted from his side. Catelyn saw a second bolt pierce his leg and saw him fall. Up in the gallery, half the musicians had crossbows in their hands instead of drums or lutes. She saw Small John Umber wrestle a table off its trestles. Crossbow bolts thudded into the wood. 1, 2, 3, as he flung it down on top of his king to protect him. "I will kill the old man. I can do that much at least." Then the tabletop that the Small John had flung over Robb shifted, and her son struggled to his knees. He had an arrow in his side, leg, and a third through his chest. Lord Walder raised a hand, and the music stopped. "The king in the north arises. Seems we killed some of your men. Oh, but I'll make you an apology. That will mend them all again." The betting scene between Tommen and Margaery in Season 5 was an uncomfortable watch because of the age gap between the underage Lannister king and his much older new wife. For example, in real life, Dean Charles, who plays Tommen, was 16 at the time of filming, while Natalie Dormer, who plays Margaery, was 33 years old. In the books, this scene does not take place because Tommen is only 8 years old. Reflecting on the plotline, the Tommen actors stated, "I wasn't expecting that," and creators David Benioff and Dan Wise as a joke came up to me and told me, "Oh, we've done you a favor. We've written you in a cheeky little sex scene." And I was like, cheers. That was the last thing I was expecting. And after filming the scene, Dean Charles, who plays Tommen, said, "We're actors. Natalie's a lovely person. She made me feel unbelievably comfortable. Hopefully she was comfortable with me. But the sex scene and stuff, it all ran smoothly." The original version of Margaery and Tommen's scene in Season 4, Episode 4, where she sneaks into his bedchamber, was way more sexual and seductive than what was depicted in the show. After reading the script, Natalie Dormer, who plays Margaery, felt very uncomfortable with the scene and refused to do it unless the scene was toned down dramatically, which is what happened in the end. Natalie explains, "That scene was altered because I phoned Dan Wise and David Benioff and said, I'm not comfortable doing this. After Joffrey was bitten by Nymeria and Arya ran off, Jaime tells Sir Ilan Payne what happened that night. Ned Stark's daughter had run off after her wolf savaged Joff, you'll recall. My sister wanted the girl to lose a hand, the old penalty for striking one of the royal blood. Robert told her she was cruel and mad. They fought for half the night. Well, Cersei fought, and Robert drank. Past midnight, the Queen summoned me inside. The King was passed out, snoring on the Myrish carpet. I asked my sister if she wanted me to carry him to bed. She told me I should carry her to bed, and shrugged out of her robe. I took her on Raymond Dari's bed after stepping over Robert. If his grace had woken, I would have killed him there and then. He would not have been the first king to die upon my sword. But you know that story, don't you? There is a theory that Rhaenyra might have had a hand in Laena's death. In 119 AC, Laena found she was with child again. Rhaenyra flew to Driftmark to attend her during the birth. And so it was that the princess was at her good sister's side on the third day of that accursed year 120 AC, the year of the Red Spring. A day and a night of labor left Laena Velaryon pale and weak, but finally she gave birth to the son Prince Daemon had so long desired. But the babe was twisted and malformed and died within the hour, nor did his mother long survive him. Her grueling labor had drained all of Lady Laena's strength, and grief weakened her still further, making her helpless before the onset of childbed fever. Afterward, Mushroom tells us, Princess Rhaenyra sat vigil with Daemon over Lady Laena's corpse, and comforted him in his grief. So Rhaenyra might have poisoned Laena with the malformed child to steal her husband and have Daemon kill her own husband, Lenore. Cersei tried to use sex to try and convince Jaime to kill Arya Stark after her wolf attacked Joffrey at the Trident. Jaime tells Sir Ilan Payne that after Robert passed out drunk, this is what happens. As I was effing her, Cersei cried, I thought that she meant me, but it was the Stark girl that she wanted. Maimed or dead, the things I do for love. It was only by chance that Stark's own men found the girl before me. If I had come on her first, she would be dead. The pock marks on Sir Ilan's face were black holes in the torchlight, as dark as Jaime's soul. He made that clacking sound. He is laughing at me, realized Jaime Lannister. For all I know, you effed my sister too, you pock-faced bastard, he spat out. Jaime has begun telling Sir Ilan everything about his relationship with Cersei since the man cannot speak or write, so his secrets are safe with him. Shae did not like Sansa at all, and was definitely jealous of her. Shae began to undo the laces of his jerkin. He caught her by the wrist and pushed her away. Wait, he said. There is something you must hear. On the morrow I am to be wed. To Sansa Stark, I know. He was speechless for an instant. Even Sansa did not know. Not then. How could you know? Did Varys tell you? Some page was telling Sir Talad about it when I took lollies to the sept. She wriggled free of his grasp and pulled her dress up over her head. As ever, she was naked underneath. I don't care. She's only a little girl. You'll give her a big belly and come back to me. Some part of him had hoped for less indifference. Had hoped, he jeered bitterly. But now you know better, dwarf. Shae is all the love you're ever like to have. In 2019, Carice Van Houten, who plays Melisandre, was asked about how comfortable she was with her full frontal nudity, and she replied, yes and no. It wasn't my favorite thing in the world at all. The Dutch are quite open-minded. We're a bit easier with that. But it's never comfortable being the only one undressed on set. It was before I had a child. I would be more uncomfortable now. The times have changed in many ways. Back then, it was all a little overwhelming. No one forced me into anything, but in hindsight, I might have been a little more cautious with it. Because at the time, in 2014, Carice had not thought too much of it by stating, I'd rather just show everyone, this is the body. Your mother has them. Let's not make a big fuss out of them. And then they get used to it. I don't do it for them. I do it for me because I pick up on tension in the room and I just want people to be fine with it. Lancel confesses to Jaime that he slept with Cersei. Jaime asks, what do you know of sin, cuz? I killed my king. Lancel replies, the brave man slays with a sword, the craven with a wineskin. We are both kingslayers, sir. Robert was no true king. What else did you do to require so much atonement? His cousin bowed his head, tears running down his cheeks. Those tears were all the answer Jaime needed. You killed the king, he said. Then you f***ed the queen. I never lay with my sweet sister. Say it. Say it. Never spilled my seed in her suggested Jaime. Womb, Lancel finished. It is not treason unless you finish inside. I gave her comfort after the king died. You were a captive, your father was in the field, and your brother, she was afraid of him, and with good reason. He made me betray her. Did he now? Jaime thought about his brother's words. Arya wants to become a faceless assassin, but they tell her, your heart is too soft to be one of us. He means to send me away. I have no heart. I only have a hole. I've killed lots of people. I could kill you if I wanted. Would that taste sweet to you? She did not know the right answer. Maybe. Then you do not belong here. Death holds no sweetness in this house. We are not warriors, nor soldiers. We do not kill to serve some lord, to fatten our purses, to stroke our vanity. We never give the gift to please ourselves, nor do we choose the ones we kill. We are but servants of the God of many faces. This is interesting, but also probably a lie, since the faceless assassins do charge ludicrous amounts of money to kill people, which means they do kill for coin, but they do also kill for free sometimes. So really they are one of the best mysteries still left in the book. This is what went through Sansa's head when she realized that she was to marry Tyrion Lannister. Your father's colours, said Cersei as they fastened it around her neck with a slender silver chain. A maiden's cloak. Sansa's hand went to her throat. She could have torn the thing away if she had dared. You're prettier with your mouth closed, Sansa, Cersei told her. Come along now, the Septon is waiting, and the wedding guests as well. No, Sansa blurted. Yes, you are a ward of the crown. The king stands in your father's place since your brother is an untamed traitor. That means he has every right to dispose of your hand. You are to marry my brother, Tyrion. My claim, she thought, sickened. Dantas the Fool was not so foolish after all. He had seen the truth of it. Sansa backed away from the queen. I won't. I'm to marry Willis. I'm to be the Lady of Highgarden. Please. This is Robb Stark and Rickard Karstark's last conversation. He dies at my word. He must die by my hand. Lord Rickard Karstark dipped his head stiffly. For that much, I thank you. But for naught else. The blood of the first men flows in my veins as much as yours, boy. You would do well to remember that. We are kin, Stark and Karstark. This kinship did not stop you from betraying me, Robb said. And it will not save you now. Kneel, my lord. Lord Rickard had spoken truly, Catelyn knew. The Karstarks traced their descent to Carlin Stark, a younger son of Winterfell who had put down a rebel lord 1,000 years ago, which might have been the Grey Starks who supported the Boltons in trying to usurp the Starks, and House Karstark had been granted lands for their valor. The castle he built had been named Carl's Hold, but that soon became Carhold, and over the centuries, the Carhold Starks had become Karstarks. Tywin telling Tyrion to get Sansa pregnant was way more disturbing. Tyrion asked his father, "Tell me, why is it that all of Sansa's maids are women in Cersei's service? I am sick of being spied upon in my own chambers. If you mislike your wife's servants, dismiss them and hire ones more to your liking. That is your right. It is your wife's maidenhead that concerns me, not her maids. Delicacy puzzles me. You seem to have no difficulty bedding whores. Is the Stark girl made differently? Why do you take so much bloody interest in where I put my cock?" Tyrion demanded. Sansa is too young. She is old enough to be Lady of Winterfell once her brother is dead. Claim her maidenhood and you'll be one step closer to claiming the North. Get her with child and the prize is all but won. Do I need to remind you that a marriage that has not been consummated can be set aside? The Melisandre actress Carice Van Houten defended the level of nudity portrayed in Game of Thrones back in 2014, but has called for more male nudity in both Game of Thrones and the industry at large. When asked why there should be more male nudity, her response was, "Hell yeah, of course it has to be functional, and it mostly is. But in general, that's what I like about the show. Not the sex per se, but the nudity is part of life. We can see machine guns, but we can't see people? I really don't get it. I have to make a point here. Who sleeps with their bra on? I mean, sorry if that's a Dutch approach, but I think we need to get used to it. It's part of life. However, the prospect of doing a scene does make her nervous, but she tries to find ways to calm herself by making sure she is very clean and smells nice during it. Tywin tells Tyrion that Mace Tyrell has refused to marry Cersei to his heir, Willis. Tyrion replies, "Refused? Our sweet Cersei." That put Tyrion in a much better mood. "When I first broached the match to him, Lord Tyrell seemed well enough disposed," his father said. A day later, all was changed. The old woman's work. She hectors her son unmercifully. Varys claims she told him that your sister was too old and too used for this precious one-legged grandson of hers. Cersei must have loved that, he laughed. Lord Tywin gave him a chilly look. She does not know, nor will she. It is better for all of us if the offer was never made. See that you remember that, Tyrion. The offer was never made. What offer? Tyrion rather suspected that Lord Tyrell might come to regret this rebuff. Your sister will be wed. The question is, to whom? I have several thoughts. Before he could get to them, they are interrupted by Grand Maester Pycelle. Barristan is so epic that after Daenerys flies off on Drogon, Barristan launches a coup and overthrows Hizdahr as king. But before he can do that, he kills Hizdahr's guard who comes from the fighting pits, called Kraz. Only cowards dressed in iron, Kraz declared, circling. No one wore armor in the fighting pits. It was blood the crowds came for. Death, dismemberment, and shrieks of agony. The music of the Scarlet Sands. So Barristan turned with him. This coward is about to kill you, sir. The man was no knight, but his courage had earned him that much courtesy. Kraz did not know how to fight a man in armor, so Barristan could see it in his eyes. Doubt, confusion, the beginnings of fear. The pit fighter came on again, screaming this time. The Arrak /low, high, low again. Selmy blocked the cuts at his head and let his armor stop the rest, whilst his own blade opened the pit fighter's cheek from ear to mouth. Even Cersei felt bad for Sansa marrying Tyrion when she tells her, "I understand your reluctant, Sansa. Cry if you must. In your place, I would likely rip my hair out. He's a loathsome little imp, no doubt of it. But marry him you shall. You can't make me. Of course we can. You can come along quietly and say your vows as befits a lady, or you may struggle and scream and make a spectacle for the stable boys to titter over. But you will end up wedded and bedded all the same." Sansa tried to run, but Cersei's handmaid caught her before she'd gone a yard. So Meryn Trant gave her a look that made her cringe. But Kettle Black touched her almost gently and said, "Do as you're told. It won't be so bad. Wolves are supposed to be brave, aren't they? Brave." Sansa took a deep breath. "I am a Stark. Yes, I can be brave." Tywin tried to make Janos Slynt Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Tyrion tells his father, "Lord Janos is a hollow suit of armor who will sell himself to the highest bidder. I count that a point in his favor. Who is like to bid higher than us?" Tyrion liked that notion not at all. "The Black brothers choose their own commander," he reminded them. "Lord Slynt is new to the Wall. I sent him there. Why should they pick him over a dozen more senior men?" "Because," his father said, in a tone that suggested Tyrion was quite the simpleton, "if they do not vote as they are told, their wall will melt before it sees another man." Yes, that would work, Tyrion thought. Tywin requests Pycelle send a raven, and Tyrion thinks to himself, "I should have trimmed his head, not his beard. And Slynt should have gone for a swim rather than been sent to the Wall." Tyrion did not like R'hllor or the Red God and thought very little of the religion, whereas in the TV show, Tyrion is shown using them in Meereen that has very little impact on the plot. We're not really sure why the TV show introduced this Red God lady only to never show her again. But in the books, this is what Tyrion thought of the followers of the Red God. They chanted in the tongue of Old Volantis, but Tyrion had heard the prayers enough to grasp the essence. "Light our fire and protect us from the dark. blah, blah, blah. Keep us toasty warm, save us from the scary things, and blah, 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 some more. He knew better than to voice such thoughts aloud. Tyrion Lannister had no use for any god, but on this ship it was wise to show a certain respect for the Red R'hllor. Jorah Mormont had removed Tyrion's chains and fetters, and the dwarf did not wish to give him cause to clap them on again. Emilia Clarke, or Daenerys Targaryen, has had a discreet off-screen dating history with Seth MacFarlane, the creator of Family Guy, Ted, and The Orville in 2012, but they separated a year later due to long-distance challenges. The 33-year-old actress also dated Charlie McDowell, an American film director and screenwriter from 2018 to 2019. However, they broke up, and then he started dating and eventually married Lily Collins from Emily in Paris. Emilia Clarke was also briefly linked to Corey Michael Smith and James Franco. The Faceless Assassins don't really recruit girls and are a little bit sexist. Arya tells the kindly man she'll leave the House of Black and White if he doesn't want her, and he replies, "My wants do not matter. It may be that the many-faced god has led you here to be his instrument. But when I look at you, I see a child, and worse, a girl child." Many have served him of many faces through the centuries, but only a few of his servants have been women. Women bring life into the world. We bring the gift of death. No one can do both. He is trying to scare me away, Arya thought. I don't care about that. You should. Stay, and the many-faced god will take your ears, your nose, your tongue. He will take your hands, your feet, your arms and legs, your private parts. Those who enter his service must give up all that makes them who they are. Can you do that? Lena Headey, who played Cersei Lannister, claimed Harvey Weinstein became furious when she rejected his advances. On social media, Headey recounted a distressing incident where, after a breakfast meeting in Los Angeles, Weinstein tried to invite her into his hotel room. When she realized what was going on and rejected him, he became more aggressive, escorting her out and sternly warning her to keep silent about this incident, leaving her in tears and feeling completely powerless. Robb Stark's wife wasn't there at the Red Wedding, and this was his last conversation before dying. Catelyn grabbed a knife. "Lord Walder!" she shouted. "Enough! You have repaid betrayal with betrayal. Let it end. Please, he is my son. My first son and my last. Let him go, and I swear we will forget this. Forget all you've done here. I swear it by the old gods and new. We will take no vengeance." She turned to her son. "Now, Robb, walk out of here." Lord Walder snorted. "And why would I let him do that?" "Mother." Robb's voice was a whisper faint. "Yes, Robb, get up and walk out. Please, save yourself. If not for me, for Jean." "Jean?" Robb grabbed the edge of the table and forced himself to stand. "Mother," he said, "Grey Wind." But then Roose Bolton stabs him in the heart. When King Viserys took Alicent Hightower, there were rumors of how an 18-year-old girl had convinced the king of the Seven Kingdoms to marry her. The Hightowers of Oldtown were an ancient and noble family of impeccable lineage. There could be no possible objection to the king's choice of bride. Even so, a few even cast doubt on Lady Alicent's virtue, suggesting she had welcomed King Viserys into her bed even before Queen Emma's death. These calumnies were never proved, though Mushroom repeats them in his testimony and goes so far as to claim that reading was not the only service Lady Alicent performed for the old king in his bedchamber. In the Vale, Prince Daemon reportedly whipped the serving man who brought the news to him within an inch of his life. Nor was the sea snake pleased when word reached Driftmark. House Valyrion had been passed over once again. His daughter, Laena, scorned, just as his son, Lenore, had been scorned by the Great Council and his wife by the Old King back in 92 AC. This is what happened after Jaime jumped into the pit to save Brienne. "You slew my bear," Vargo Hoat shrieked, "and I'll serve you the same if you give me trouble," Steelshanks threw back. "We're taking the wench. Her name is Brienne," Jaime said. "Brienne, the Maid of Tarth. You are still maiden, I hope?" Her broad, homely face turned red. "Yes." "Oh, good," Jaime said. "I only rescue maidens." To Hoat, he said, "You'll have your ransom for both of us. A Lannister pays his debts. Now fetch us some ropes and get us out of here." Afterwards, on the road back to King's Landing, Brienne rides up to Jaime and asks, "So Jaime," she was still in a soiled pink satin dress, "I am grateful, but you were well away. Why come back?" A dozen quips came to mind, each crueler than the one before, but Jaime only shrugged. "I dreamed of you," he said. When Luke presented himself at Storm's End, looking for Lord Boris's support, this is what the Lord of House Baratheon told him. "I, Princess Rhaenys, is kin to me and mine. Some great-aunt I never knew was married to her father. But the both of them are dead, and Rhaenyra, she's not Rhaenys, is she?" He had nothing against women, Lord Boris went on to say. He loved his girls. A daughter is a precious thing, but a son, should the gods ever grant him a son of his own blood, Storm's End would pass to him, not to his sisters. Why should the Iron Throne be any different? And with a royal marriage in the offering through Aemond, Rhaenyra's cause was lost. She would see that when she learnt that she had lost Storm's End, Lord Boris would tell her so himself. "Bow down to your brothers, it's for the best." His girls would fight with each other sometimes, the way girls do, but he saw to it they always made peace afterward. King Robert was wrong to strike Cersei. The queen looked to her husband. "If any man had dared speak to a Targaryen as he has spoken to you—" "Do you take me for Ares?" Robert interrupted. "I took you for a king. Jaime and Tyrion are your own brothers. This man dishonors you with every breath he takes, and yet you stand there meekly, asking if his leg pains him and would he like some wine." Robert's face was dark with anger. "How many times must I tell you to hold your tongue, woman?" Cersei's face was a study in contempt. "What a jape the gods have made of us two," she said. "By all rights, you ought to be in skirts and me in mail." Purple with rage, the king lashed out. A vicious backhand blow to the side of the head. She stumbled against the table and fell hard. Yet Cersei Lannister did not cry out. Lena Headey delved deep into her strained relationship she shared with her ex-boyfriend Jerome Flynn, unveiling the startling reasons behind their fallout. "We hated each other. We had nothing to say to each other, both on and off the set of Game of Thrones." Flynn echoed her sentiments, asserting, "We're both adults and professional. We leave our personal differences aside when we step onto the set." Insiders privy to the show's production revealed instances where the drama led to heated arguments and on-set clashes between the two stars, causing disruptions and delays in shooting schedules. Sources allege that the rift between Headey and Flynn emerged around 2014 during Season 4 filming, coinciding with reports of there being a no scenes together clause in their respective contracts, which becomes very obvious in Season 7 through multiple random instances. Varys' riddle on power is quite different. He tells Tyrion, "Some say knowledge is power. Some tell us that all power comes from the gods." Yet that day on the steps of Baelor's Sept, our godly High Septon and the lawful Queen Regent were as powerless as any cobbler in the street. Who truly killed Eddard Stark, do you think? Joffrey, who gave the command? Sir Ilyn Payne, who swung the sword? Or another? Tyrion cocked his head sideways. "Did you mean to answer your damned riddle, or only to make my head ache?" Varys smiled. "Here then. Power resides where men believe it resides. No more and no less. So power is a murmur's trick." "A shadow on the wall," Varys murmured. "Yet shadows can kill, and oft-times a very small man can cast a very large shadow." Tyrion smiled. "Lord Varys, I am growing strangely fond of you. I may kill you yet, but I think I'd feel sad about it." As children, Cersei was supposed to marry Oberyn Martell, and Jaime was supposed to marry Elia Martell. This is because Joanna Lannister was friends with Oberyn's mother, and the two planned to betroth their children to each other. However, when Oberyn and Elia arrived at Castle Rock, Joanna had died, and Tywin refused both suggestions and said Cersei was intended for Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. Later, Elia married Prince Rhaegar instead, and Oberyn thinks that this is why Tywin had Elia killed. Oberyn wanted Tyrion to come to Dorne to make Myrcella queen. He tells Tyrion, "Perhaps you will return to Sunspear with me when the day's bloodletting is done. My brother Doran would be most pleased to meet the rightful heir to Castle Rock." especially if he brought his lovely wife, the Lady of Winterfell. Tyrion thinks to himself, does the snake think I have Sansa squirreled away somewhere, like a nut I'm hoarding for winter? If so, Tyrion was not about to disabuse him. A trip to Dorne might be very pleasant, now that I reflect on it. Plan on a lengthy visit. Prince Oberyn sipped his wine. You and Doran have many matters of mutual interest to discuss. Music, trade, wine, the laws of inheritance and succession. No doubt an uncle's counsel would be benefit to Queen Marcella in the trying times ahead. If Varys had his little birds listening, Oberyn was giving them a ripe earful. Samwell actually schemed and cheated to have Jon made Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. He did this by convincing the men of the Shadow Tower and East Watch by the Sea to vote for Jon. However, Dennis Mallister, the commander of the Shadow Tower, is the one who should have been Lord Commander. And here is what he said after Jon's elevation. It was a hard thing young Samwell asked of me. When Lord Colgall was chosen, I told myself, no matter, your time will come. When it was Lord Mormont, I thought, he is strong and fierce, but he is old. Your time may yet come, but you are half a boy, Lord Snow. And now I must return to the Shadow Tower, knowing that my time will never come. Do not make me die regretful. Your uncle was a great man, your Lord Father and his father as well. I shall expect full as much of you. There was a moment when Catelyn realized Littlefinger had betrayed her when talking with Jaime. If you did not send the killer, your sister did. If so, I'd know. Cersei keeps no secrets from me. Then it was the imp. Why did the assassin have his dagger? What dagger was this? Your brother won it from Lord Baelish at the tourney on Prince Joffrey's name day. Won it, you say? How? Wagering on when you tilted against the Knight of Flowers. Yet, when she heard her own words, Catelyn knew she had gotten it wrong. Tyrion always backed me in the lists, Jaime said. Whatever my brother wagered, he lost. Catelyn realizes Tyrion Lannister had said much the same thing as they rode through the mountains of the moon. She had refused to believe him. Peter had sworn otherwise. Peter, who had been almost a brother, and yet if Jaime and Tyrion told the same tale, the brothers had not seen each other since departing Winterfell more than a year ago. Tywin was impressed that Tyrion secured a Dornish alliance while as hand. In the scene, Tyrion demands recognition from his father for saving the city from Stannis. Tywin replies, your chain was a clever stroke and crucial to our victory. Is that what you wanted to hear? I am told we have you to thank for our Dornish alliance as well. You may be pleased to learn that Marcella has arrived safely at Sunspear. This is what happened when Tyrion asked Tywin to show some appreciation after the Battle of the Blackwater. Tywin says, and you want your own reward, is that it? Very well, what is it you would have of me? Lands? Castle? Some office? A little bloody gratitude would make a nice start. Lord Tywin stared at him, unblinking. Murmurs and monkeys require applause. So did Ares, for that matter. You did as you were commanded, and I am sure it was to the best of your ability. No one denies the part you played. The part I played, what nostrils Tyrion had left must surely have flared. I saved your bloody city, it seems to me. Most people seem to feel that it was my attack on Lord Stannis' flank that turned the tide of the battle. Lords Tyrell, Rowan, Redwine, and Tarly fought nobly as well. And I'm told it was your sister Cersei who set the pyromancers to making the wildfire that destroyed the Baratheon fleet. It was Otto, in both instances, who convinced Viserys to make Rhaenyra his heir over Daemon. In Fire and Blood, Otto took a great dislike to the king's brother, and it was him who convinced Viserys to remove Prince Daemon as Master of Coin, and then as Master of Laws. Actions the hand soon came to regret. As commander of the City Watch, with 2,000 men under his command, Daemon waxed more powerful than ever. On no account can Prince Daemon be allowed to ascend to the Iron Throne. The hand wrote his brother, Lord of Oldtown. He would be a second Maegor the Cruel, or worse. It was Sir Otto's wish, then, that Princess Rhaenyra succeed her father. Better the realm's delight than Lord Fleabottom, he wrote. Nor was he alone in his opinion. Yet his party faced a formidable hurdle. A male claimant must prevail over a female. Esme Bianco, or the Roz actress from Game of Thrones, has made allegations against musician Marilyn Manson, accusing him of sexual assault, human trafficking, and abuse. Bianco alleged that she was given drugs and alcohol, subjected to threats of violence, and R. Bianco states that initially Manson showed her kindness and love, but quickly began controlling major aspects of her life. She reports that he dictated her clothing choices, preferring her in short pencil dresses with stockings, and controlled her sleep, allegedly enforcing that she could only sleep with his permission. She further alleges that Manson restricted her freedom of movement by not allowing her to have keys to their shared apartment. In one specific incident, Bianco claims Manson sent her a text blaming her for a studio mishap she was not involved in. Bianco describes feeling like a prisoner under Manson's control in her home. Her friend, Fraser Knight, corroborates her feelings of entrapment, recalling phone calls they exchanged. Bianco is now dealing with PTSD as a result of these experiences. Tywin was furious that Cersei dismissed Barristan Selmy. His father had not raised his voice, yet Tyrion could see the anger in the gold of his eyes. And dismissing Selmy, where was the sense in that? Yes, the man was old, but the name of Barristan the Bold still has meaning in the realm. He lent honor to any man he served. Can anyone say the same of the Hound? You feed your dog bones under the table. You do not seat him beside you on the high bench. He pointed a finger at Tyrion's face. If Cersei cannot curb the boy, you must. And if these counselors are playing us false, Tyrion knew. Spikes, he sighed. Heads, walls. I see you have taken a few lessons from me. More than you know, father, Tyrion answered quietly. This is probably in reference to Tysha and the lesson Tywin dealt Tyrion at a young age, which would ultimately cause Tywin's death. Criston Cole broke Harwin Strong's collarbone during a fight at Rhaenyra and Leonor's wedding. So after Rhaenyra's rejection of Criston Cole to run away with her, from that day forward, the love that Sir Criston Cole had formerly borne for Rhaenyra Targaryen turned to loathing and disdain, and the man who had previously been the princess's constant companion and champion became the most bitter of her foes. When Rhaenyra bestowed her garter on Sir Harwin, her new husband laughed and gave one of his own to Sir Joffrey. Denied Rhaenyra's favour, Criston Cole turned to Queen Alicent instead. Wearing her token, the young Lord Commander of the Kingsguard defeated all challengers, fighting in a black fury. He left Breakbones with a broken collarbone and a shattered elbow, prompting Mushroom to name him Broken Bones thereafter. But it was the Knight of Kisses who felt the fullest measure of his wrath, and this is where Sir Criston killed him in the books. Oberyn and Tyrion plotted to make Marcilla queen. Tyrion thought to himself, Queen Marcilla? It would have been more tempting if only he did have Sansa tucked beneath his cloak. If she declared for Marcella over Tommen, would the North follow? What the Red Viper was hinting at was treason. Could Tyrion truly take up arms against Tommen, against his own father? Cersei would spit blood. It might be worth it for that alone. This is what Robb Stark truly felt about Catelyn freeing Jaime. Robb's face was cold. Is that why you freed the Kingslayer? To make a peace with the Lannisters? I freed Jaime for Sansa's sake, and Arya's, if she still lives. You know that. But if I nurtured some hope of buying peace as well, was that so ill? Yes, he said. The Lannisters killed my father. Do you think I have forgotten that? I don't know. Have you? Catelyn had never struck her children in anger, but she almost struck Robb then. It was an effort to remind herself how frightened and alone he must feel. You are king in the north. The choice is yours. I only ask that you think on what I've said. The singers make much of kings who die valiantly in battle, but your life is worth more than a song. To me at least. Who gave it to you? Tyrion tells Sansa to think of Loras while they consummate their marriage. Goose prickles covered her arms and legs. She kept her eyes on the floor, too shy to look at him. But when she was done, she glanced up and found him staring. There was hunger in his green eye, it seemed to her, and fury in the black. Sansa did not know which scared her more. You're a child, he said. She covered her breasts with her hands. I flowered. A child, he repeated. But I want you. Does that frighten you, Sansa? Yes, me as well. I know I am ugly. No, He pushed himself to his feet. Don't lie, Sansa. I am malformed, scarred, and small. But she could see him groping. A bed, when the candles are blown out, I am made no worse than other men. In the dark, I am the Knight of Flowers. He took a draught of wine. Tywin knows about Tyrion threatening Tommen. Your sister told me of threats against my grandsons. Lord Tywin's voice was colder than ice. Did she lie? Tyrion would not deny it. I made threats, yes, to keep Alea, or Roz in the TV show, safe, so the Kettle Blacks would not misuse her. To save a whore's virtue, you threatened your own house, your own kin. Is that the way of it? You are the one who taught me that a good threat is often more telling than a blow. Not that Joffrey hasn't tempted me, but Tommen, why would I harm Tommen? He's a good lad, and mine own blood, as was your mother. Lord Tywin rose abruptly to tower over his dwarf son. Go back to your bed, Tyrion, and speak to me no more of your rights to Castle Rock. You shall have your reward, but it shall be one I deem appropriate. Tyrion knows that Shae doesn't actually love him, but convinces himself that she does. Shae grinned that wicked grin Tyrion liked so well. Be quiet and kiss me, he commanded. He could taste the wine on her lips, pressed against him as her fingers moved to the lacings of his breeches. My lion, she whispered when he broke off the kiss to undress. My sweet lord, my giant of Lannister. Tyrion pushed her towards the bed and got inside of her. She screamed loud enough to wake Baelor the Blessed in his tomb, and her nails left gouges in his back. He'd never had a pain he liked half so well. Fool, he thought to himself afterward, as they lay in the center of the sagging mattress amidst the rumpled sheets. Will you never learn, dwarf? She's a whore, damn you. It's your coin she loves, not your Remember Tysha? Sadly, Tyrion will be proved right during his trial for Joffrey's murder. This is how Tywin told Tyrion to rule King's Landing when asked to go there. And what am I to do there? Asked Tyrion. Rule, his father said curtly. Tyrion hooted with laughter. My sweet sister might have a word or two to say about that. Let her say what she likes. Her son needs to be taken in hand before he ruins us all. I blame those jackanapes on the council, our friend Peter, the vulnerable Grand Maester, and that cockless wonder Lord Varys. What sort of counsel are they giving Joffrey when he lurches from one folly to the next? Whose notion was it to make this Janos Slynt a lord? The man's father was a butcher, and they grant him Harrenhal. That was the seat of kings. Not that he will ever set foot inside it, if I have a say. I am told he took a bloody spear for his sigil. A bloody cleaver would have been my choice. This is how Tyrion tried to convince Sansa to sleep with him. I am generous, loyal to those who are loyal to me. I've proven I'm no craven, and I am cleverer than most. Surely wits count for something. I can even be kind. Kindness is not a habit with us Lannisters, I fear, but I know I have some somewhere. I could be good to you. He is as frightened as I am, Sansa realized. Perhaps that should have made her feel more kindly towards him, but it did not. All she felt was pity, and pity was death to desire. He was looking at her, wanting for her to say something, but all her words had withered. She could only stand there trembling. When he finally realized she had no answer for him, Tyrion Lannister drained the last of his wine. I understand, he said bitterly. Get in the bed, Sansa. We need to do our duty. Mushroom claims this is how Rhaenyra tried to seduce Criston Cole in the books after being forced to marry Lenore. The princess went to White Sword Tower when only Sir Criston was there, barred the door, and slipped off her cloak to reveal her nakedness underneath. I saved my maidenhead for you, she told him. Take it now as proof of my love. It will mean little and less to my betrothed, and perhaps when he learns that I am not chaste, he will refuse me. Yet, for all her beauty, her entreaties fell on deaf ears. For Sir Criston was a man of honor and true to his vows. Even when Rhaenyra used the art she had learned from her uncle Daemon, Cole would not be swayed. Scorned and furious, the princess donned her cloak again and swept out into the night. where she chanced to encounter Sir Harwin Strong. Breakbones had long desired the princess and lacked Sir Criston's scruples. It was he who took Rhaenyra's innocence. This is what happened when Tyrion asked to be named heir. Castle Rock, Tywin declared in a flat, cold, dead tone, and then never. The word hung between them, huge, sharp, poisoned. I knew the answer before I asked, Tyrion thought. 18 years since Jaime joined the Kingsguard, and I never once raised the issue. I must have known. I must always have known. Why? He'd made himself ask, though he knew he would rue the question. You asked that? You, who killed your mother to come into the world. You are an ill-made, devious, disobedient, spiteful little creature full of envy, lust, and low cunning. Men's laws give you the right to bear my name and display my colors, since I cannot prove that you are not mine. To teach me humility, the gods have condemned me to watch you waddle about wearing my sigil. But neither gods nor men shall ever compel me to let you turn Castle Rock into your whorehouse. This is what Sansa thought of Tyrion's naked body. She stared at the stunted legs, the swollen brutish brow, the green eye and the black one, the raw stump of his nose and crooked pink scar, the coarse tangle of black and gold hair that passed for his beard. Even his manhood was ugly, thick and veined, with a purple head. This is not right. This is not fair. How have I sinned that the gods would do this to me? How? On my honor as a Lannister, the imp said. I will not touch you until you want me to. It took all the courage that was in her to look in those mismatched eyes and say, and if I never want you to, my lord. His mouth jerked as if she had slapped him. Never. Her neck was so tight that she could scarcely nod. Why, he said, this is why the gods made whores for imps like me. Before he endured the worst of Ramsay's tortures, Theon was allowed to escape with the help of Kyra, his former bedwarmer at Winterfell. However, Ramsay had actually allowed them to escape and gave them a day's head start before chasing them with his hunting hounds. Theon tried to convince Kyra that one of them could escape if they separated, but she was too scared to, and because of this, they were both captured and taken back to the Dreadfort's dungeon. While Kyra was killed by Ramsay and his hounds, Theon is tortured further and tormented by Kyra's death. And saving Jean Poole, or Sansa Stark in the show, is his way of redeeming himself, and once again living as Theon Greyjoy. This hunting down women is one of Ramsay's favorite pastimes, and he has supposedly done this more than a dozen times, and names his hounds after the women who gave him a good chase. This includes Kyra. Rhaenyra never even considered making peace with Alicent and the Greens. Instead, after she went into labor early and her baby had died, Queen Rhaenyra announced the girl's name to be Visenya and stated, "She was my only daughter, and they killed her. They stole my crown and murdered my daughter, and they shall answer for it." And so the dance began as the princess called a council of her own, the Black Council. Rhaenyra herself presided with Prince Daemon, Maester Gerardus, her 3 sons, though none had reached manhood. Jace was 14, Luke 13, Joffrey 11. 2 Kingsguard stood with them, Sir Eric Cargyle, twin to Sir Eric, and the Westerman, Sir Laurent Marbrand. 30 knights, 100 crossbowmen, and 300 men-at-arms made up the rest of Dragonstone's garrison. That had always been deemed sufficient for a fortress of such strength. As an instrument of conquest, however, our army leaves something to be desired, Prince Daemon observed sourly. After Jaime rescued Tyrion from the Black Cells, this is the moment the 2 brothers became sworn enemies. "Thank you, brother," Tyrion said, "for my life. It was a debt I owed you." Jaime's voice was strange. "A debt?" He cocked his head. "I do not understand." "Good, some doors are best left closed." "Oh dear," said Tyrion. "Is there something grim and ugly behind it? I'll try not to weep. Tell me." "Tyrion," Jaime is afraid. "Tell me," Tyrion said again. His brother looked away. "Tysha," he said softly. "Tysha." His stomach tightened. "What of her?" "She was no whore. I never bought her for you. That was a lie that father commanded me to tell. Tysha was what she seemed to be. A crofter's daughter chance met on the road. Tyrion could hear the faint sound of his own breath whistling hollowly through the scar of his nose. During Aegon's conquest, Vhagar was one of the 3 dragons that helped bring Targaryen domination over the 7 kingdoms. Vhagar was instrumental in taking the Vale of Arryn without losing a single life, then helped kill thousands during the Field of Fire. Vhagar's significance persisted during the First Dornish War, where the dragon ended up killing tens of thousands of Dornishmen in revenge for the death of Meraxus. During the Faith Militant Uprising, Vhagar safeguarded House Targaryen from religious persecution and helped install Maegor I to the throne. During the reign of Jaehaerys I, the grandson of Aegon the Conqueror, Vhagar continued to serve House Targaryen during the Golden Age of the Targaryen dynasty. However, Vhagar would also be there at House Targaryen's worst catastrophes during the Dance of the Dragons, after being taken to ride by Prince Aemon Targaryen, which would taint the legendary dragon's memory. Jaime thinks Catelyn is trying to poison him when visiting him in captivity. "I fear I'm in no condition to receive you." Jaime Lannister had been allowed no razor since he was taken in the Whispering Wood, and a shaggy beard covered his face. The clothes were rotting on his body, his face was pale and wasted. And even so, the power and the beauty of the man was still apparent. "I see you had no taste for the wine I sent you." Such sudden generosity seemed somewhat suspect. "I can have your head off any time I want. Why would I need to poison you? Death by poison can seem natural. Harder to claim than my head simply fell off." He squinted up from the door. "I'd invite you to sit, but your brother has neglected to provide me a chair. I can stand well enough." "Can you? You look terrible, I must say." This is after finding out about Bran and Rickon. Jaime confessed to Tyrion that his first wife, Tysha, wasn't paid, but actually loved Tyrion. Jaime could not meet his eyes. Tysha, he tried to remember what she had looked like. A girl. She was only a girl, no older than Sansa. "My wife?" he croaked. "She wed me. For your gold," father said. "She was lowborn. You were a Lannister of Castle Rock. All she wanted was the gold, which made her no different from a So it would not be a lie, not truly, and he said that you required a sharp lesson, that you would learn from it and thank me later." "Thank you?" Tyrion's voice was choked. "He gave her to his guards, a barracks full of guards. He made me watch. Aye, and more than watch, I took her too, my wife. I never knew he would do that. You must believe me." "Oh, must I?" Tyrion snarled. These were the terms the Greens offered Rhaenyra on the bridge at Dragonstone. If the princess would acknowledge Aegon as king and make deference before the Iron Throne, Aegon would confirm her in her possession of Dragonstone and allow the island and castle to pass to her son Jace upon her death. Her second son, Luke, would be recognized as the rightful heir to Driftmark and the lands and holdings of House Valyrion. Her boys by Prince Daemon, Aegon the Younger, and Viserys would be given places of honor at court, the former as the king's squire, the latter as his cupbearer. Pardons would be granted to those lords and knights who had conspired treasonously with her against their true king. Rhaenyra heard these terms in stony silence, mostly because these are rubbish terms. Rhaenyra already has Dragonstone and Driftmark. She would have to give her 2 youngest sons up as hostages and pay homage to Aegon in King's Landing, where he could easily have her killed. After Tyrion found out that Jaime betrayed him, "Why should I believe you about anything ever? She was my wife, Tyrion." He hit him. It was a slap, backhanded, but he put all his strength into it. All his fear, all his rage, all his pain. Jaime was squatting, unbalanced. The blow sent him tumbling backwards to the floor. I suppose I earned that. "Oh, you've earned more than that, Jaime. You and my sweet sister and our loving father. Yes, I can't begin to tell you what you've earned, but you'll have it. That I swear to you. A Lannister always pays his debts. Give me the keys and go. I will find Varys on my own." He cocked his head and stared up at his brother with his mismatched eyes. "Jaime, can you fight left-handed?" "Rather less well than you," Jaime said bitterly. "Good, they will be well matched if we should ever meet again. The cripple and the dwarf." This is what happened when Sansa tried to thank the Hound for saving her. She made herself look at his face. Really look. The scars are not the worst part.
It's his eyes. She had never seen eyes so full of anger. I should have come to you after, she said, to thank you for saving me. You were so brave. Brave! His laugh was half a snarl. A dog doesn't need courage to chase off rats. They had me 30-1, and not a man of them dared face me. She hated the way he talked. Always so harsh and angry. Does it give you joy to scare people? No. It gives me joy to kill people. His mouth twitched. Wrinkle up your face all you like, but spare me this false piety. You were a High Lord's get. Don't tell me Lord Eddard Stark of Winterfell never killed a man.
Even though Viserys became extremely displeased with Daemon's actions as an adult, their bond from growing up kept the king from ever turning against his brother. The books tell us, though far from blind to his brother's flaws, Viserys cherished his memories of the free-spirited, adventurous boy that Daemon had been. His daughter was his life's great joy, he often said. But a brother is a brother. Time and time again, he strove to make peace between Prince Daemon and Sir Otto. Thus did matters stand in King's Landing until 105 AC, when Queen Aemma gave birth to a son that left both of them, leaving king and court bereft, save perhaps for Prince Daemon, who was observed in a brothel on the Street of Silk, making drunken japes with his highborn cronies about the heir for a day. When word got back to Viserys, he finally...
This is Aemon's fantastic kill the boy speech. Allow me to give my lord one last piece of counsel, the old man had said. The same counsel that I once gave my brother when we parted for the last time. He was 33 when the great council chose him to mount the Iron Throne. A man grown with sons of his own, yet in some ways still a boy. Egg had an innocence to him, a sweetness we all loved. Kill the boy within you, I told him the day I took ship for the wall. It takes a man to rule. The old man felt Jon's face. You are half the age that Egg was, and your own burden is a crueler one, I fear. You will have little joy of your command, but I think you have the strength in you to do the things that must be done. Kill the boy, Jon Snow. Winter is almost upon us. Kill the boy and let the man be born.
The Hound tells Sansa that her father liked killing, but she replies that was his duty. He never liked it. Is that what he told you? Clegane laughed again. Your father lied. Killing is the sweetest thing there is. He drew his longsword. Here's your truth. Your precious father found that out on Baelor's steps. Lord of Winterfell, Hand of the King, the mighty Eddard Stark of a line 8,000 years old. Ilan Payne's blade went through his neck all the same, didn't it? Do you remember the dance he did when his head came off his shoulders? Sansa hugged herself, suddenly cold. Why are you always so hateful? I was thanking you, just as if I was one of those true knights you love so well. Yes. What do you think a knight is for, girl? You think it's all taking favors from ladies and looking fine in gold plate? Knights are for killing. After fleeing King's Landing, Tyrion is in the company of Varys' friend Illyrio Mopatis and tells him, my niece Marcilla is in Dorne, as it happens, and I have half a mind to make her a queen. Illyrio smiled. What has this poor child done to you that you would wish her dead? Queen her, I said, not kill her. The cheesemonger spooned up cherries. In Volantis, they use a coin with a crown on one face and death on the other. Yet, it is the same coin. To queen her is to kill her. Dawn might rise for Marcilla, but dawn alone is not enough. If you are as clever as our friend insists, you know this. Tyrion looked at the fat man with new interest. He is right on both counts. To queen her is to kill her. And I knew that. Futile gestures are all that remain to me. This one would make my sister weep bitter tears, at least. Tyrion helps to make Aegon Targaryen, Daenerys' nephew, king of Westeros, while talking with Illyrio Mopatis, who says, the road to Castle Rock does not go through Dawn, my little friend. When men are starving and sick of fear, they look for a savior. They may look, but if all they find is Stannis, not Stannis, nor Marcilla. The yellow smile widened. Another, stronger than Tommen, gentler than Stannis, with a better claim than the girl Marcilla. A savior come from across the sea to bind up the wounds of bleeding Westeros. Fine words. Tyrion was unimpressed. Words are wind.
Who is this bloody savior? A dragon. The cheesemonger saw the look on his face at that and laughed. A dragon with 3 heads. However, this dragon is not Daenerys, but Phaegon, who was pretending to be Rhaegar's son, but might secretly be Illyroy's son and Varys' nephew. Drogo is so rich, even his slaves wear gold collars. The old woman washed her long silver pale hair and gently combed out the snags, all in silence. The girl scrubbed her back and her feet and told her how lucky she was. Drogo is so rich that even his slaves wears golden collars. 100,000 men ride in his Khalasar, and his palace in vast Dothrak has 200 rooms and doors of solid silver. There was more like that, so much more. What a handsome man the cow was, so tall and fierce. A demon archer. Daenerys said nothing. She had always assumed that she would wed Viserys when she came of age. For centuries the Targaryens had married brother to sister. Since Aegon the Conqueror had taken his sisters to bride, the line must be kept pure. This is actually why Drogo wants to marry her. For her lineage. In 2019, the Melisandre actress Karis Van Houten regrets how much she revealed of herself by stating, "When the Me Too movement started, that's when it started sinking in for me. And it did sort of change my perspective on my whole career, not just Game of Thrones. In retrospect, I thought, why did that scene have to be without clothes? Why was that normal? I did question things, and it was not so much that I was blaming anyone, but that's just how we evolved and just how the movement affected me. Jon plans to man all the castles on the wall. I mean to garrison all of them in time, said Jon, but for the moment it would just be Icemark and Greyguard. And has my lord decided who's to command at Greyguard? Janos Slynt, said Jon. God save us. A man does not rise to command of the Goldcloaks without ability. Jon Arryn raised him up and put the defense of King's Landing into his hands. Lord Janos cannot be as great a fool as he seems, and I want him well away from Alliser Thorne. Might be that so, said Bedwick, but I'd still send him to the kitchens to help Three-Finger Hob cut up the turnips. If I did, I never dare eat another turnip. Half the morning passed before Lord Janos reported as commanded. Jon was cleaning Longclaw. Some men would have given the task to a steward, but Lord Eddard had taught his sons to care for their own weapons. Daenerys grew up on stories of Westeros from her brother, so that one day she would believe it was hers. In the Free Cities, they talked of Westeros and the Sunset Kingdoms. Her brother had a simpler name. Our land, he called it. The words were like a prayer with him. If he said them enough, the gods were sure to hear. Ours by blood right, taken from us by treachery, but ours still. Ours forever. You do not steal from the dragon. Oh no, the dragon remembers. And perhaps the dragon did remember, but Dany could not. She had never seen this land her brothers said was theirs. This realm beyond the narrow sea. These places he talked of, Castle Rock and the Eyrie, High Garden and the Vale of Arryn, they were just words to her. Viserys had been a boy of 8 when they fled King's Landing to escape the advancing armies of the usurper. Ned gave Bran the most profound truth in A Song of Ice and Fire. Are you well, Bran? He asked, not unkindly. Yes, father, Bran told him. He looked up. His Lord Father loomed over him like a giant. Robb says the man died bravely, but Jon says he was afraid. What do you think? His father asked. Bran thought about it. Can a man still be brave if he's afraid? That is the only time a man can be brave, his father told him. Do you understand why I did it? He was a wildling, Bran said. They carry off women and sell them to the others. His Lord Father smiled. Old Nan has been telling you stories again. In truth, the man was an oath breaker, a deserter from the Night's Watch. No man is more dangerous. The deserter knows his life is forfeit if he is taken, so he will not flinch from any crime, no matter how vile. This was the moment when Tyrion decided not to sleep with Sansa. Open your eyes. She had promised to obey. She opened her eyes. He was sitting by her feet, naked. Where his legs joined, his manhood poked up stiff and hard from a thicket of coarse yellow hair. But it was the only thing about him that was straight. "My lady," Tyrion said, "you are lovely, make no mistake, but I cannot do this. My father be damned, we will wait. The turn of a moon, a year, a season, however long it takes, until you have come to know me better and perhaps to trust me a little." His smile might have been meant to be reassuring, but without a nose, it only made him look more grotesque and sinister. "Look at him," Sansa told herself. "Look at your husband, at all of him. Septim Ordain said all men are beautiful. Find his beauty. Try." We see a glimpse of Jon and Robb's relationship in a horse race that the show cut out. The deserter died bravely. Robb said, with his mother's colouring, the fair skin, red-brown hair and blue eyes like the Tullys of Riverrun. He had courage at the least. No, Jon Snow said quietly, it was not courage. This one was dead of fear. You could see it in his eyes, Stark. Jon's eyes were a grey so dark they seemed almost black, but there was little they did not see. Jon was slender where Robb was muscular, dark where Robb was fair, graceful and quick where his half-brother was strong and fast. Robb was not impressed. He died well. "Race you to the bridge? Done," Jon said, kicking his horse forward. Robb cursed and followed, and they galloped off down the trail. Robb laughing and hooting, Jon silent and intent. This is what was going through Cersei's head during her walk of shame. Lord Tywin's blood was in her. "I am a lioness. I will not cringe for them." The Queen shrugged off her robe in one smooth, unhurried motion, as if she were back in her own chambers disrobing for her bath. When the cold wind touched her skin, she shivered violently. It took all her strength of will not to try and hide herself with her hands, as her grandfather's had done. They were looking at her, all the hungry eyes. But what were they seeing? "I am beautiful," she reminded herself. How many times had Jaime told her that? Even Robert had given her that much when he came to her bed in his cups to pay his drunken homage with his She held her chin high as a queen should. Someone cried out, a woman's voice. Women were always the cruelest where other women were concerned. Ned thought about marching north to defeat Ned's radar and the wildling threat. In the Godswood, while cleaning ice, Ned tells Catelyn about the deserter he executed. He was the 4th this year, Ned said grimly. The poor man was half mad. Something had put a fear in him so deep that my words could not reach him. He sighed. Benjen writes that the strength of the Night's Watch is down below 1,000. It's not only desertions. They are losing men on rangings as well. Is it the wildlings? She asked. Who else? Ned lifted ice. Look down the cool steel length of it, and it will only grow worse. The day may come when I will have no choice but to call the banners and ride north to deal with this king beyond the wall for good and all. Beyond the wall? The thought made Catelyn shudder. Ned saw the dread on her face. Ned's radar is nothing for us to fear. The Hound tells Sansa how many people he has killed. He laid the edge of his longsword against her neck, just under her ear. Sansa could feel the sharpness of the steel. I killed my first man at 12. I've lost count of how many I've killed since then. High lords, fat men, knights, and women and children too. They're all meat, and I'm the butcher. Let them have their lands and their gods and their gold. Let them have their sirs. Sandor Clegane spat at her feet to show what he thought of that. So long as I have this, he said, lifting the sword from her throat, there's no man on earth I need fear. Except your brother, Sansa thought, but she had better sense than to say it aloud. He is a dog, just as he says, a half-wild, mean-tempered dog that bites any hand that tries to pet him, and yet will savage any man who tries to hurt his masters. When Theon returns to Winterfell as Ramsay's creature, he no longer fears other people's laughter, and even such, as these made mock of Theon Turncloak. Let them laugh. Theon's pride had perished here in Winterfell. There was no place for such in the dungeons of the Dreadfort. When you have known the kiss of a flaying knife, a laugh loses all its power to hurt you. Daenerys knew better than to trust Illyroy Mopatis when her brother tells her, a gift from the Magister Illyroy, Viserys said, smiling. Her brother was in a high mood tonight. The color will bring out the violet in your eyes, and you shall have gold as well, Illaroy has promised. Tonight you must look like a princess. A princess, Dani thought. She had forgotten what that was like. Why does he give us so much? She asked. For nigh on half a year they had lived in the Magister's house, eating his food, pampered by his servants. Dani was 13, old enough to know that such gifts seldom come without their price. Illaroy is no fool, Viserys said. He was a gaunt young man with nervous hands and a feverish look in his pale lilac eyes. The Magister knows that I will not forget my friends when I come into my throne. But Illaroy has no intention for Viserys to become king. This is how Jon Snow convinced Ned Stark to spare the direwolf pups. There are 5 pups, he told father. 3 male, 2 female. What of it, Jon? You have 5 trueborn children, Jon said. 3 sons, 2 daughters. The direwolf is the sigil of your house. Your children were meant to have these pups, my lord. Bran saw his father's face change. He loved Jon with all his heart at that moment. Even at 7, Bran understood what his brother had done. The Count had come right only because Jon had omitted himself. He had included the girls, included even Rickon, the baby, but not the bastard who bore the surname Snow. The name decreed be given to all those in the north with no name of their own. Their father understood as well. You want no pup for yourself, Jon? He asked softly. The direwolf graces the banners of House Stark, Jon pointed out. I am no Stark, father. After Arya beat up Hot Pie, Yoren reveals the truth of what was supposed to happen at her father's execution. Next time you take the stick to one of your brothers, you'll get twice what you give. You hear me? They're not my brothers, Arya thought. Yoren was looking at her. You hurt? Some, he spat. That Pie boy's hurting worse. It wasn't him as killed your father, girl. Nor that thieving Lommy neither. Hurting them won't bring him back. I know, Arya muttered sullenly. Here's something you don't know. It wasn't supposed to happen like it did. I was set to leave, wagons bought and loaded, and a man comes with a boy for me, and a purse of coin, and a message. Lord Eddard's to take the black. He says to me, wait, he'll be going with you. Why do you think I was there? Only something went queer. Joffrey, Arya breathed. Someone should kill him. Someone will. But it won't be me, nor you neither. Sansa asked the Hound if he is afraid of Stannis and his men. Not even the men across the river. Clegane's eyes turned towards the distant fires. All this burning, he sheathed his sword. Only cowards fight with fire. Lord Stannis is no coward. He's not the man his brother was either. Robert never let a little thing like a river stop him. What will you do when he crosses? Fight, kill, die maybe. This is what happened when Ned found out about Jon Arryn's death. I am so sorry, my love. Jon Arryn is dead. His eyes found hers, and she could see how hard it took him, as she had known it would. In his youth, Ned had fostered at the Eyrie, and the childless Lord Arryn had become a second father to him and his fellow ward, Robert Baratheon. When the Mad King Aerys Targaryen had demanded their heads, the Lord of the Eyrie had raised his moon and falcon banners in revolt, rather than give up those he had pledged to protect. Jon, he said, is this news certain? It was the King's seal, and the letter is in Robert's own hand. I saved it for you. He said Lord Arryn was taken quickly. Even Maester Pycelle was helpless, but he brought the milk of the poppy, so Jon did not linger long in pain. That is some small mercy, I suppose. Robert asked Ned to run away with him while on the way to King's Landing. That damnable wheelhouse, I promise you, if that wretched thing breaks another axle, I'm going to burn it. And Cersei can walk. Ned laughed. I will gladly light the torch for you. The king clapped him on the shoulder. I've half a mind to leave them all behind and just keep going. A smile touched Ned's lips. I do believe you mean it. I do. I do, the king said. What do you say, Ned? Just you and me, 2 vagabond knights on the king's road, our swords at our sides and the gods know what in front of us, and maybe a farmer's daughter or a tavern's wench to warm our beds tonight. Would that we could, Ned said. But we have duties now, my liege, to the realm, to our children, I to my lady wife, and you to your queen. We are not the boys we were." Jace unwittingly got his own brother killed when he told his mother, "We should bear those messages," he said. "Dragons will win the lords over quicker than ravens." His brother, Lucerys, agreed, insisting that he and Jace were men, or near enough to make no matter. "Our uncle calls us Strongs, but when the lords see us on Dragonback, they will know that for a lie. Only Targaryens ride dragons." Mushroom tells us that the sea snake grumbled at this, insisting that the three boys were Valyrians, yet he smiled as he said it, with pride in his voice. Even young Joffrey chimed in, offering to mount his own dragon, Tyraxus, and join his brothers. Queen Rhaenyra forbade that. Joff was but 11, but Jacaerys was 14, Lucerys 13, bold and handsome lads, skilled in arms who had long served as squires. "If you go as messengers, not as knights," she told them. "You must take no part in any fighting." Both boys agreed. After the Black Council, a hasty coronation was held the next day. The arrival of Sir Steffan Darklyn, late of Aegon's Kingsguard, had brought the stolen crown of King Jaehaerys the Conciliator. 300 sets of eyes looked on as Daemon placed the old king's crown on the head of his wife, proclaiming her Rhaenyra first of her name. The prince claimed for himself the style protector of the realm, and Rhaenyra named her eldest son, Jacaerys, the Prince of Dragonstone and heir to the Iron Throne. Her first act as queen was to declare Otto Hightower and Queen Alicent traitors and rebels. "As for my half-brothers and my sweet sister Helaena," she announced, "they have been led astray by the council of evil men. Let them come to Dragonstone, bend the knee, and ask my forgiveness, and I shall gladly spare their lives and take them back into my heart. For they are my own blood, and no man or woman is as accursed as the kinslayer." This is what Ned Stark thought of Jorah Mormont when discussing the spy among the Dothraki. "Do you remember Sir Jorah Mormont?" "Would that I might forget him," Ned said bluntly. Sir Jorah had tried to swell the family coffers by selling some poachers to a Tyroshi slaver. As the Mormonts were bannermen to the Starks, his crime had dishonored the North. Ned had made the long journey west to Bear Island, only to find when he arrived that Jorah had taken ship beyond the reach of ice and the king's justice. 5 years had passed since then. Sir Jorah is now in Pentos, anxious to earn a royal pardon that would allow him to return from exile, Robert explained. Lord Varys made good use of him. "So the slaver has become a spy," Ned said with distaste. "I would rather he became a corpse." "Varys tells me that spies are more useful than corpses," Robert said. This was Aegon's furious reaction to Rhaenyra's crowning. The book reads, "When word of Rhaenyra's coronation reached the Red Keep the next day, to the great displeasure of Aegon, he said, 'My half-sister and my uncle are guilty of high treason. I want them arrested, and I want them dead.' Cooler heads on the Green Council wish to parley. 'The princess must be made to see that her cause is hopeless,' Grand Maester Orwyle said. 'Brother should not war against sister. Send me to her, that we may talk and reach an amicable accord.' Aegon would not hear of it. Septon Eustace tells us that his grace accused the Grand Maester of disloyalty and spoke of having him thrown into a black cell, with your black friends. But when the two queens, his mother, Queen Alicent, and his wife, Queen Helaena, spoke in favour of Orwyle's proposal, the truculent king gave way reluctantly. This is what happened when Robert brought up Jon Snow. And yet there was that one time, what was her name? That common girl of yours. Becca? No, she was one of mine, God loves her. Was it Meryl? You know the one I mean, your bastard's mother. Her name was Wyla, Ned replied with cool courtesy, and I would sooner not speak of her. Wyla, yes, the king grinned. She must have been a rare wench if she could make Lord Eddard Stark forget his honour, even for an hour. You never told me what she looked like. Ned's mouth tightened in anger. Nor will I. Leave it be, Robert. For the love you say you bear me, I dishonoured myself, and I dishonoured Catelyn. Gods have mercy, you scarcely knew Catelyn. I had taken her to wife. She was carrying my child.
You are too hard on yourself, Ned. You always were. Damn it, no woman wants Baelor the Blessed in her bed. During the reign of King Viserys and the Dance of the Dragons, House Greyjoy is led by the terrifying Dalton Greyjoy, known as the Red Kraken, who is the kind of son Balon Greyjoy wished he had. After the death of King Viserys I Targaryen in 129 AC, Dalton was only 16 years old. However, the Red Kraken is said to have laughed after hearing the outbreak of war. The Greens of Aegon II Targaryen offered Dalton the position of Master of Ships and the Admiralty to replace Sir Tywin Lannister, who had been made Master of Coin, if Dalton would bring his ships around Westeros to battle Lord Corlys Valyrion, the Sea Snake. Instead of leaping to the offer, Dalton waited to see what the Blacks had to offer. On the Black Council, Prince Daemon Targaryen suggested appealing to Dalton's bloodthirst to bring him on the side of Rhaenyra Targaryen. Instead of asking him to sail to Blackwater Bay, Rhaenyra only asked for Dalton to attack her enemies. There was a sweet moment when Ygritte told Jon not to be afraid for joining the wildlings. Ygritte sat beside him after she had eaten. "When mans hear how you did for Halfhand, he'll take you quick enough," she told him. "Take me for what?" The girl laughed mockingly. "For one of us. Do you think you're the first crow ever flew down off the wall? In your hearts, you all want to fly free. And when I'm free," he said slowly, "will I be free to go?" "Sure you will." She had a warm smile, despite her crooked teeth. "And we'll be free to kill you. It's dangerous being free, but most come to like the taste of it." She put her gloved hand on his leg, just above the knee. "You'll see." "I will," thought Jon. "I will see and hear and learn." The wildlings had taken him for an oathbreaker, but in his heart he was still a man of the Night's Watch. Dragons are like nuclear weapons in that they force entire kingdoms to surrender despite having numerical superiority, like we saw when Aegon I conquered Westeros. However, dragons on both sides of a conflict is akin to mutually assured destruction, which is why the king to winning the conflict is all about taking out the other side's nuke or dragons without risking your own. Daemon communicates this reality by saying, "We do not have the strength to take King's Landing by storm, no more than our foes could hope to capture Dragonstone. But Aegon is a green boy, and green boys are easily provoked. Mayhaps we can goad him into a rash attack." The Sea Snoke would command the fleet, whilst Princess Rhaenys flew overhead to keep their foes from attacking their ships with dragons. Meanwhile, ravens would go forth to Riverrun, the Eyrie, Pike, and Storm's End to gain the allegiance of their lords. Rhaenyra is afraid to face Aegon in a dragon battle with the Greens despite having more dragons. Lords Celtigar and Staunton urged the princess to fly against King's Landing at once and reduce the city to ash and bone. "And how will that serve us, my lord?" the Sea Snake demanded of him. "We want to rule the city, not burn it to the ground." "It will never come to that," Celtigar insisted. "The usurper will have no choice but to oppose us with his own dragons. Our 9 must surely overwhelm his 4. At what cost?" Princess Rhaenyra wondered. "My sons would be riding 3 of those dragons, I remind you, and it would be 9 against 4. I will not be strong enough to fly for some time yet. And who is to ride Silverwing, Vermithor, and Sea Smoke? You, my lord? I hardly think so. It will be 5 against 4, and one of their 4 will be Vhagar. That is no advantage." At the start of the Dance of the Dragons, Aegon had already won the allegiance of the Lannisters of Castle Rock. But what are the other houses going to do? Well, the Lord Tyrell of Highgarden was a mewling boy in swaddling clothes whose mother, acting as his regent, would most likely line the Reach with her own overmighty bannermen, the Hightowers. "Storm's End will stand with us," Princess Rhaenys said, incorrectly. She herself was of that blood on her mother's side. Prince Daemon had good reason to hope that the Maid of the Vale might bring the Eyrie to their side as well. Aegon would surely seek the support of House Greyjoy, he judged. Only with the support of the Iron Islands could Aegon hope to surpass the strength of House Valyrion at sea. The North was too remote to be of much importance in the fight, the council judged. By the time the Starks gathered their banners and marched south, the war might well be over. The key to winning the Dance of the Dragons is the Riverlands, since the Green forces in Oldtown and Castle Rock need to cross the Riverlands to get to King's Landing. The book reads, which left only the Riverlords, a notoriously quarrelsome lot ruled over, in name at least, by House Tully of Riverrun. "We have friends in the Riverlands," Daemon said, "though not all of them dare share their colors yet. We need a place where they can gather, a toehold on the mainland, large enough to house a sizable host, and strong enough to hold against whatever forces the usurper could send against us." He showed the lords a map. Here, Harrenhal, and so it was decided. Prince Daemon would lead the assault on Harrenhal, riding Caraxes. Princess Rhaenyra would remain on Dragonstone until she had recovered her strength. The Valyrian fleet would close off the Gullet, sailing forth from Dragonstone and Driftmark to block all ships entering or leaving Blackwater Bay. Jason Momoa, who played Khal Drogo, has been served with divorce papers by his wife, Lisa Bonnet. This ends their 18-year relationship. The legal move comes nearly 2 years after Bonnet and Momoa publicly announced their separation. In the divorce filing, Bonnet cites irreconcilable differences. An insider explained that the split stemmed from differing focuses. Momoa is deeply invested in his acting career, often requiring him to travel for extended periods, whereas Bonnet prefers to remain in Los Angeles. Here is a description of all the dragons Rhaenyra has at her disposal at the start of the Dance of the Dragons. Prince Daemon has Caraxes, and Princess Rhaenyra Syrax, both huge and formidable beasts. Caraxes especially was fearsome and no stranger to blood and fire after the Stepstones. Rhaenyra's 3 sons were all dragon riders. Vermax, Arax, and Taraxis were thriving and growing larger every year. Aegon the Younger, eldest of Rhaenyra's 2 sons by Prince Daemon, commanded the young dragon Stormcloud, though he had not yet to mount him. His little brother, Viserys, went everywhere with his egg. Rhaenys' own she-dragon, Meleys the Red Queen, had grown lazy, but remained fearsome when roused. Prince Daemon's twins by Laena Velaryon might yet be dragon riders too. Baela's dragon, the slender pale green moon dancer, would soon be large enough to bear the girl upon her back, meaning the Greens have 3 dragons they can ride: Vhagar, Sunfire, and Dreamfire, while Rhaenyra has 7 or 6 after Luke's death. It is Rhaenys, not Daemon, who gives the dragon count at the Black Council. When Maester Gerardus points out Aegon has dragons, Rhaenys interjects by saying, "We have more, and ours are larger and stronger, but for Vhagar. Dragons thrive best here on Dragonstone." She tallied for the council. King Aegon had his Sunfire, a splendid beast, though young. Aemond One-Eye rode Vhagar. Queen Helena's mount was Dreamfire, the she-dragon who had once borne the old king's sister, Rhaena, through the clouds. Prince Darion's dragon was Tessarion, with her wings dark as cobalt and her claws and crest and belly scales as bright as beaten copper. "That makes 4 dragons of fighting size," said Rhaenys. Queen Helena's twins had their own dragons too, but no more than hatchlings. However, in this show, it looks as though Darion doesn't exist yet, meaning the Greens only have 3 dragons. This was the moment when Littlefinger tried to warn Ned Stark not to trust him. "Is there a man in your service that you can trust utterly and completely?" "Yes," said Ned. "In that case, I have a delightful place in Valyria that I would dearly love to sell you," Littlefinger said with a mocking smile. The wiser answer was no, my lord. But be that as it may, send this paragon of yours to Sir Hugh and the others. Your own comings and goings will be noted, but even Varys the Spider cannot watch every man in your service every hour of the day." He started for the door. "Lord Peter," Ned called after him, "I am grateful for your help. Perhaps I was wrong to mistrust you." Littlefinger fingered his small pointed beard. "You are slow to learn, Lord Eddard. Distrusting me was the wisest thing you've done since you climbed down off your horse." Corlys and Rhaenys always supported Rhaenyra for queen and didn't need to be convinced at all. After Aegon declared himself king, Corlys immediately declared his strength for Rhaenyra. The book reads, "Though the sea snake had grown old, he liked to say that he was clinging to life, like a drunken sailor clinging to the wreckage of a sunken ship. Mayhaps the 7 have preserved me for this one last fight." With Lord Corlys came his wife, Princess Rhaenys, 55, her face lean and lined, her black hair streaked with white, yet fierce and fearless as she had been at 22. "The queen who never was," Mushroom calls her. Those who sat at the Black Council knew full well that King Aegon would name them traitors. Each had already received a summons from King's Landing, demanding they present themselves to the new king. All their hosts combined could not match the power the High Towers alone could field. Cheese threatened Helaena to pick one of her boys to die, or Blood would her daughter. As they entered the apartments, Helaena was holding Maelor's little hand and calling out her mother, Queen Alicent's name. Blood barred the door and slew the queen's guardsman, whilst Cheese appeared to snatch up Maelor. "Scream and you all die," Blood told her grace. Queen Helaena kept her calm, it is said. "Who are you?" she demanded of the two. "Debt collectors," said Cheese. "An eye for an eye, a son for a son. We only want the one to square things. Won't hurt the rest of you fine folks, not one little hair. Which one you want to lose, your grace?" Once she realized what he meant, Queen Helaena pleaded with the man to kill her instead. "A wife's not a son," said Blood. "It has to be a boy." Cheese warned the girl to make a choice soon, before Blood grew bored and her little girl. This is how Cheese forced Helaena to order the death of her own son. He told her, "Pick, or we kill them all." On her knees, weeping, Helaena named her youngest, Maelor. Perhaps she thought the boy was too young to understand. Or perhaps it was because the older boy, Jaydeewis, was King Aegon's firstborn son and heir. "You hear that, little boy?" Cheese whispered to Maelor. "Your mama wants you dead." Then he gave Blood a grin, and the hulking swordsman slew Prince Jaydeewis, striking off the boy's head with a single blow. The queen began to scream. Strange to say, the rat catcher and the butcher were true to their word. They did no further harm to Queen Helaena or her surviving children, but rather fled with the prince's head in hand. A hue and cry went up, but Cheese knew the secret passageways as the guards did not, and the killers made their escape. This was Daemon's terrifying reaction to Luke's death. On Dragonstone, Queen Rhaenyra collapsed when told of Luke's death. Luke's young brother, Joffrey, swore a terrible oath of vengeance against Prince Aemond and Lord Boris. As the Black Council sat to consider how to strike back, a raven appeared from Harrenhal. "An eye for an eye, a son for a son," Prince Daemon wrote. "Lucerys shall be avenged." Let it not be forgotten, in his youth, Daemon Targaryen had been the Prince of the City. His face and laugh familiar to every cut purse, whore, and gambler in Flea Bottom. The prince still had friends in the low places of King's Landing, and followers amongst the Goldcloaks. Unbeknownst to King Aegon, the Hand, or the Queen Dowager, he had allies at court as well, even on the Green Council. This was Aegon, Otto, Helaena, and Alicent's reaction to the blood and cheese incident. In his grief and fury, King Aegon II commanded that all of the city's ratcatchers be taken out and hanged, and this was done. Though blood and cheese had spared her life, Queen Helaena cannot be said to have survived that fateful dusk. Afterward, she would not eat, nor bathe, nor leave her chambers, and she could no longer stand to look upon her son Maelor, knowing that she had named him to die. The king had no recourse but to take the boy from her and give him over to their mother, the Dowager Queen Alicent, to raise as if he were her own. Aegon and his wife slept separately thereafter, and Queen Helaena sank deeper and deeper into madness, whilst the king raged and drank and raged. This is how blood was captured. 2 days after, blood was seized at the Gate of the Gods, trying to leave King's Landing with the head of Prince Jaydeewis hidden in one of his saddle sacks. Under torture, he confessed that he had been taking it to Harrenhal to collect his reward from Prince Daemon. He also gave up a description of the whore he claimed had hired them, an older woman, foreign by her talk. The other harlots called her Misery. After 13 days of torment, Blood was at last allowed to die. Queen Alicent had commanded Larys Clubfoot to learn his true name so that she might bathe in the blood of his wife and children, but our sources do not say if this occurred. Sir Luther Largent and his Goldcloaks searched the Street of Silk from top to bottom, but no trace of cheese or the white worm was ever found.
This was the Green's reaction to Luke's death, and with his death, the war of ravens and envoys and marriage pacts came to an end, and the war of fire and blood began in earnest. Aemon Targaryen, who would henceforth be known as Aemon the Kinslayer to his foes, returned to King's Landing having won the support of Storm's End for his brother Aegon. If he thought to receive a hero's welcome, he was disappointed. Queen Alicent went pale when she heard what he had done, crying, "Mother, have mercy on us all." Nor was Sir Otto pleased. "You only lost one eye," he is reported to have said. "How could you be so blind?" The king himself did not share their concerns, however. Aegon II welcomed Prince Aemond home with a great feast, hailed him as the true blood of the dragon, and announced that he made a good beginning. This is how blood and cheese got into the Red Keep. The Tower of the Hand was less secure. The two men crept up through the walls, bypassing the spearmen posted at the tower doors. Sir Otto's rooms were of no interest to them. Instead, they slipped into his daughter's chambers one floor below. Queen Alicent had taken up residence there after the death of King Viserys, when her son Aegon moved into Maegor's Holdfast with his own queen. Once inside, Cheese bound and gagged the Dowager Queen, whilst Blood strangled her bedmaid. Then they settled down to wait, for they knew it was the custom of Queen Helena to bring her children to see their grandmother every evening before bed. Blind to her danger, the queen appeared as dusk was settling over the castle, accompanied by her 3 children. Jaehaerys and Jaehaera were 6, Maelor 2. Why didn't Daemon go and commit blood and cheese himself? He knows the layout of the Red Keep better than anyone else, as we saw in Season 1. He could have easily brought a group of men with him, overwhelmed Aemond, and then fled, essentially winning the war because he could then escape back to Dragonstone and have Rhaenyra deploy all her dragons against King's Landing, and without Vhagar, it would be an easy victory for the Blacks. However, what makes more sense is what happened in the book, with Daemon holding Harrenhal and deploying 2 of his men to take vengeance, and Daemon is mentioned as having friends on the small council who allowed this attack to occur, being Larys Strong, who is theorized as wanting both the Blacks and Greens to wipe each other out. So he allowed this attack to further exuberate the war between Aegon and Rhaenyra, with no chance of there being peace. Aegon too emerges as a surprisingly likable character, ignoring, of course, what he did to Diana in episode 8 of season 1. Aegon was actually pretty nice, wanting to return sheep to the shepherd and feeling bad that the guy came all this way. Not only that, but he was also the funniest character in the episode for this season, with his interactions with his wife and the rats being humorous. His conversations with Larys, his boys on the Iron Throne, and letting his son annoy Tywin Lannister at the small council meeting brought much needed levity. He's kind of like Joffrey, doing what he wants, but isn't sadistic. Sadly though, after what happens at the end of episode 1 with Blood and Cheese, we'll probably get a less fun and more angry version of him now, which is a shame since the actor is doing a really spectacular job of making him likable considering. Daemon had a special friend who he trusted utterly, who knew the wine sinks and rat pits that festered in the shadow of the Red Keep, as well as Daemon himself. Amidst the stews of Flea Bottom, Prince Daemon's go-between found suitable instruments. One had been a sergeant in the City Watch, big and brutal. He had lost his gold cloak for beating a whore to death whilst in a drunken rage. The other was a rat catcher in the Red Keep. Their true names are lost to history. They are remembered as Blood and Cheese. Cheese knew the Red Keep better than the shape of his own, Mushroom tells us. The hidden doors and secret tunnels that Maegor the Cruel had built were as familiar to the Ratcatcher as the rats he hunted. Using a forgotten passageway, Cheese led Blood into the heart of the castle, unseen by any guard. This is what happened when Jace met Cregan Stark. The text tells us that Vermax carried Jaehaerys Valyrion to Winterfell to negotiate with its formidable young lord, Cregan Stark. When the Prince of Dragonstone arrived, autumn was well underway, yet Cregan welcomed Jaehaerys warmly. The harsh northern climate made Vermax ill-tempered, so the prince did not stay long among the northerners. However, Cregan and Jaehaerys quickly grew fond of each other, as the boy prince reminded Cregan of his own younger brother, who had died 10 years earlier. They drank, hunted, and trained together, ultimately swearing an oath of brotherhood sealed in blood. Cregan Stark and Jaehaerys Valyrian reached an accord and signed and sealed the agreement that Grand Maester Munkin calls the Pact of Ice and Fire in his true telling. Like many such pacts, it was to be sealed with a marriage between the two men's children when they came of age.
Aegon had all the advantages at the start of the Dance of the Dragons, including the biggest and richest cities of Westeros supporting him: Old Town, King's Landing, and Lannisport. Every visible symbol of legitimacy belonged to Aegon. He sat the Iron Throne, he lived in the Red Keep, he wore the Conqueror's crown, wielded the Conqueror's sword, and had been anointed by a Septon of the Faith before the eyes of tens of thousands. Grand Maester Orwyle sat in his councils, and the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Criston Cole, had placed the crown upon his head. And he was male, which in the eyes of many made him the rightful king. Against all that, Rhaenyra's advantages were few. Some older lords might recall the oaths they had sworn when she was made her father's heir, though how many would still fight for her now that she was a woman wed, her body aged and thickened by 6 childbirths. Prince Daemon, tried and tempered in the Stepstones, has more experience of warfare than all the Greens combined. Moreover, Rhaenyra's Blacks have 6 dragon riders after Luke's death, and the Greens have only 4 or 3 in the show. However, at Dragonstone, 6 other dragons made their lairs in the smoky caverns of the Dragon Mount above the castle. There was Silverwing, Good Queen Alysane's mount of old; Sea Smoke, the pale grey beast that had been the pride and passion of Sir Lenore Valyrian; Old Vermithor, unridden since the death of King Jaehaerys; and behind the mountain dwelled 3 wild dragons, never claimed nor ridden by any man, living or dead. The small folk had named them Sheepstealer, Grey Ghost, and the Cannibal. Find riders to master Silverwing, Vermithor, and Sea Smoke, and we will have 9 dragons against Aegon's 4. Mount and fly their wild kin, and we will number 12, even without Stormcloud, Princess Rhaenys pointed out. That is how we shall win this war. Who was Cregan Stark, the Lord of Winterfell Jace went to meet? Well, in Fire and Blood, we learn Cregan Stark, later known as the Old Man of the North, was only 21 years old when Prince Jaehaerys visited him in 129 AC. He inherited the lordship of Winterfell at the age of 13 following the death of his father, Lord Rickon, in 121 AC. During his minority, his uncle Bernard acted as regent and ruled the north. However, when Cregan turned 16 in 124 AC, he found his uncle reluctant to relinquish power. This led to growing tensions between them as Cregan chafed under his uncle's authority. Finally, in 126 AC, Cregan Stark rebelled, imprisoned Bernard and his 3 sons, and assumed control of the north. Shortly after, he married Lady Ara Nori, his beloved childhood companion, but she tragically died in 128 AC while giving birth to their son and heir, whom Cregan named Rickon after his father. This is how Daemon plans to win the Dance of the Dragons. In the Stepstones, my enemies learned to run and hide when they saw Caraxes' wings or heard his roar, but they had no dragons of their own. It is no easy thing for a man to be a dragon slayer, but dragons can kill dragons, and have. Any maester who has ever studied the history of Valyria can tell you that. I will not throw our dragons against the usurpers unless I have no other choice. There are other ways to use them, better ways. Then the prince laid his own strategies. Rhaenyra must have a coronation of her own to answer Aegon's. Afterward, they would send out ravens calling on the lords of the 7 kingdoms to declare their allegiance to their true queen. We must fight this war with words before we go to battle. The lords of the great houses held the key to victory, Daemon insisted. Their bannermen would follow wherever they led. Jace is reported to have cheated on Baela with Cregan's sister, who is a Lyanna Stark clone. Jace had been betrothed to his cousin Baela since he was 4 and she was 2, And even though it seems very unlikely he would break such a solemn oath to marry a supposed half-wild, unwashed northern bastard named Sarah Snow, this kind of matches the story of Rhaegar and Lyanna falling in love despite both of them being meant for other people. In the first season of House of the Dragon, Criston Cole pledged his loyalty as Alicent Hightower's personal protector after the rift between him and Rhaenyra. However, in the second season, it has now been confirmed there is a romantic connection, which is a show-only inclusion and not in the books. They have a total of 2 love scenes together in the first episode. After the first encounter, Alicent tells him that they shouldn't do this again, but by the end of the episode, they have another intimate moment. However, this comes at the cost of not protecting the Queen and heir to the Iron Throne, who should have been better protected, which is Cole's job. So his harsh criticisms of Rhaenyra are really just a reflection of his own flaws. His compromised integrity prevents him from effectively safeguarding the king and his kin, positioning him as the most morally corrupt figure at the heart of the Dance of the Dragons. Arya asks her father, "Can Bran still be a knight?" "No," Ned said. He saw no use in lying to her. Yet someday he may be the lord of a great holdfast and sit on the king's council. He might raise castles like Brandon the Builder, or sail a ship across the sunset sea, but he will never run beside his wolf again, he thought, with a sadness too deep for words, or lie with a woman, or hold his own son in his arms. Arya asked, "Can I be a king's counselor and build castles and become the High Septon?" "You," Ned said, "will marry a king and rule his castle, and your sons will be knights and princes and lords, and yes, perhaps even a High Septon." Arya screwed up her face. "No," she said, "that's Sansa." She folded up her right leg and resumed her balancing. Ned sighed and left her there. Lord Cregan's son, Rickon, was a year old. Prince Jacaerys was as yet unmarried and childless, but it was assumed that he would sire children of his own once his mother sat the Iron Throne. Under the terms of the pact, the prince's firstborn daughter would be sent north at the age of 7, to be fostered at Winterfell until such time as she was old enough to marry Lord Cregan's heir to bind the 2 houses together. King Aegon and Queen Helaena are known to have 2 children, Jaehaerys and Jaehaera. By having only one male heir, the story simplifies the blood and cheese conflict when Helaena is captured and compelled to identify the male heir among the 2 children. She unhesitantly points at Jaehaerys. While blood suspects a possible ruse, cheese can discern that she is speaking the truth. The reasoning behind Helena's choice remains unclear, but maybe she possesses prior knowledge of Jaehaerys' destiny. In the books, before singling out a child, Helaena bravely offers herself as a sacrifice to the assassins, a stark contrast to the show where she instead presents her valuable necklace. In the book, the assassins tasked with carrying out the deadly deed struggle to differentiate between the 2 brothers. Helaena has a younger son named Maelor, whom she decides should be killed to spare the life of Jaehaerys. However, Blood and Cheese ignored her wishes and killed Jaehaerys instead. Supposedly Jaehaerys slept with and married Cregan Stark's bastard sister. Mushroom tells us there was a young maiden whom he calls the Wolf Girl, named Sarah Snow. Prince Jaehaerys was so captivated by this girl, a bastard daughter of the late Lord Rickon Stark, that he spent the night with her. When Lord Cregan learned that his guest had taken the maidenhead of his bastard sister, he was furious. His anger only subsided when Sarah Snow revealed that the prince had married her. They had exchanged vows in Winterfell's Godswood before a heart tree, and only then had she given herself to him, wrapped in furs amidst the snows under the watchful eyes of the old gods. Though this tale is charming, like many of Mushroom's stories, it seems more like a salacious imagination than anything historical. However, it does mirror the story of Rhaegar and Lyanna quite a bit. The fall of Harrenhal to Prince Daemon came as a great shock to Aegon and the Greens. Until that moment, Aegon II had believed his half-sister's cause to be hopeless.
Harrenhal left his grace feeling vulnerable for the first time. The subsequent defeats at the Burning Mill and Stonehenge came as further blows and made the king realize that his situation was more perilous than it had seemed. These fears deepened as ravens returned from the Reach, where the Greens had believed themselves the strongest. House Hightower and Oldtown were solidly behind King Aegon, and his grace had the Arbor too. But elsewhere in the south, other lords were declaring for Rhaenyra, including Lord Tarly of Hornhill, Samwell Tarly's house, and many other powerful houses. Loudest amongst these traitors was Sir Alan Beesbury, Lord Lyman's heir, who was demanding the release of his grandsire from the dungeon where most believed the former Master of Coin to be confined. After the fall of Harrenhal, Aegon began to blame Otto Hightower. "Do something," he demanded of Sir Otto. The Hand assured him that something was being done. He had hatched a plan to break the Valyrian blockade. One of the chief pillars of support for Rhaenyra's claim was her consort. Yet Prince Daemon represented one of her greatest weaknesses as well. The prince had made more foes than friends during the course of his adventures. Sir Otto Hightower reached across the narrow sea to the prince's enemies, the kingdom of the Three Daughters. By itself, the royal fleet lacked the strength to break the sea snake's chokehold on the gullet, and King Aegon's overtures to Dalton Greyjoy of Pike had thus far failed to win the Iron Islands to his side. The combined fleets of Tyrosh, Lys, and Mia would be more than a match for the Valyrians, however. This is who Daemon fought in Episode 3 of House of the Dragon. After the fall of Harrenhal, many houses in the Reach declared for Aegon. House Tyrell saw this support for Rhaenyra from their own bannermen, and the mother of the young Lord Tyrell of Highgarden acting as regents for the boy, who can be seen as a Marjorie Tyrell meet Lysa Tully, suddenly thought better of their support for King Aegon and decided House Tyrell would take no part in this struggle. King Aegon began to drown his fears in strong wine at this news. Sir Otto sent word to his nephew, Lord Ormond Hightower, beseeching him to use the power of Oldtown to put down this rash of rebellions in the Reach. Other blows followed: the Vale, White Harbour, Winterfell. The Blackwoods and other river lords streamed toward Harrenhal and Prince Daemon's banners. The Sea Snake's fleets closed Blackwater Bay. Aric Cargyle's mission might not have been to kill Rhaenyra, but her two children, Jace and Joffrey, instead. After Criston Cole proposed his plan to the Kingsguard Knight, Sir Aric did not undertake this mission happily. Indeed, Septon Eustace tells us, the troubled knight visited the Red Keep Sept on the night he was to sail, to pray for forgiveness to our mother above. Yet, as Kingsguard, sworn to obey king and commander, he had no choice in honour but to make his way to Dragonstone, clad in the salt-stained garb of a simple fisherman. The true purpose of Sir Aric's mission remains a matter of some contention. Grand Maester Munkin tells us that Cargyle had been commanded to slay Rhaenyra, putting an end to her rebellion at a stroke, whilst Mushroom insists that her sons were Cargyle's prey, that Aegon II wished to wash out the blood of his murdered son with that of his bastard nephews Jaehaerys and Joffrey Strong. This was King Aegon's response to the murder of his son. Aegon desired to avenge the murder of his heir by means of an attack on Dragonstone, descending on the island citadel on Dragonback to seize or slay his half-sister and her bastard sons. It took all of the Green Council to dissuade him. Sir Criston Cole urged a different course. The pretender princess had made use of stealth and treachery to kill Prince Jaehaerys, Cole said. Let them do the same. We will pay the princess back in her own bloody coin, he told the king. The instrument the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard chose for the king's vengeance was his sworn brother, Sir Aric Cargyle. Sir Aric was intimately familiar with the ancient seat of House Targaryen, having visited there often during the reign of King Viserys. It would be a simple thing to deliver Cargyle to the fishing village under the castle. From there, he could make his own way to the Queen. This is supposedly what happened when the two Cargyle twins met each other in Dragonstone, according to Mushroom. In the end, Sir Eric and Sir Eric dealt each other mortal wounds and died in one another's arms, with tears upon their cheeks. Mushroom's account is shorter, saltier, and altogether nastier. The fight lasted only moments, our fool says. There were no declarations of brotherly love. Each Cargyle denounced the other as a traitor as they clashed. Sir Eric, standing above his twin on the spiral steps, struck the first mortal blow, a savage downward cut that nigh took his brother's sword arm off at the shoulder. But as he collapsed, Sir Eric grasped his slayer's white cloak and pulled him close enough to drive a dagger deep into his belly. Sir Eric was dead before the first guards arrived, but Sir Eric took 4 days to die of his gut wound, screaming in horrible pain and cursing his traitor brother all the while. When Daemon seized Harrenhal, it served as a sharp reminder to the rest of Westeros of the martial prowess of Prince Daemon and the power of Caraxes, and gave the Queen a stronghold in the heart of Westeros, to which her supporters could rally. When Prince Daemon set forth his call to arms, they rose up all along the rivers, knights and men-at-arms and humble peasants who yet remembered the realm's delight, so beloved of her father, and the way she smiled and charmed them as she made her progress through the riverlands in her youth. Hundreds and then thousands buckled on their swords belts and donned their mail, or grabbed a pitchfork and a crude wooden shield, and began to make their way to Harrenhal to fight for Viserys' little girl. The Lord of the Trident, having more to lose, were not so quick to move, but soon enough they began to throw their lots in with the Queen. Otto's plan to recruit Daemon's enemies from across the Narrow Sea took time and deeply angered the king, especially when they were not even in session when Sir Otto's envoys arrived. The delay did not sit well with the young king. Aegon II had run short of patience with his grandfather's avoidance to battle. Though his mother, the Dowager Queen Alicent, spoke up in Sir Otto's defense, his grace turned a deaf ear to her pleading. Summoning Sir Otto to the throne room, he tore the chain of office from his neck and tossed it to Sir Criston Cole. "My new hand is a steel fist," he boasted. "We are done with writing letters." Sir Criston wasted no time in proving his mettle. "It is not for you to plead for support from your lords, like a beggar pleading for alms," he told Aegon. "You are the lawful king of Westeros, and those who deny it are traitors. It is past time they learnt the price of treason." Daemon seized Harrenhal at the very onset of the war, even before Lucerys died at Storm's End, unlike in the show. This is what the book tells us about its easy capture. Though large parts of Harren's great folly were in ruins, the castle's towering curtain walls still made it as formidable a stronghold as any in the Riverlands. But Aegon the Dragon had proved it vulnerable from the sky. With its lord, Larys Strong, away in King's Landing, the castle was but lightly garrisoned. Having no wish to suffer the fate of Black Harren, its elderly castellan Sir Simon Strong, uncle to the late Lord Lionel, great-uncle to Lord Larys, was quick to strike his banners when Caraxes lighted atop King's Spire Tower. In addition to the castle, Prince Daemon at a stroke had captured the not inconsiderable wealth of House Strong and a dozen valuable hostages. House Tully of Riverrun was supposed to support Aegon Targaryen. However, this is what happened instead. The Lord Paramount of the Trident, Grover Tully, had been an old man at the Great Council of 101, where he spoke for Prince Viserys. Though now failing, he was no less stubborn. He had favoured the rights of the male claimant in 101, and the years had not changed his views. Lord Grover insisted that Riverrun would fight for young King Aegon, yet no such word went forth. The old lord was bedridden and would not live much longer. Riverrun's maester had declared, "I would sooner the rest of us did not die with him," declared Sir Elmo Tully, his grandson. Riverrun had no defense against Dragonfire, he pointed out to his own sons, and both sides in this fight rode dragons. And so, whilst Lord Grover thundered and fulminated from his deathbed, Riverrun barred its gates, manned its walls, and held its silence. The Riverlands love Rhaenyra. The book tells us, from the twins rode Sir Forrest Frey, the very same fool Frey who had once begged for Rhaenyra's hand, now grown into a most puissant knight. Lord Samwell Blackwood, who had once lost a duel for her favour, raised her banners over Raventree. Sir Amos Bracken, who had won that duel, followed his Lord Father when House Bracken declared for Aegon. The Moutons of Maidenpool, the Pipers of Pink Maiden Castle, the Roots of Harroway, the Daries of Dari, the Mallisters of Seaguard, and the Vances of Wayfarer's Rest all announced their support for Rhaenyra. Peter Piper, the grizzled lord of Pink Maiden, spoke for many when he said, "I swore her my sword. I'm older now, but not so old that I've forgotten the words I said. And it happens, I still have the sword." Alice Rivers would go on to seduce Aemon Targaryen. However, she seems to have had no effect on Daemon. Was she in truth a witch who lay with demons, bringing forth dead children as payment for the knowledge they gave her? Was she a simple-minded slattern, as Eustace believes? A wanton who uses her poisons and potions to bind men to her, body and soul? Alice Rivers was at least 40 years of age during the Dance of the Dragons. That much is known. Mushroom makes her even older. All agree that she looked younger than her years. But whether that was simple happenstance or achieved through her practice of the dark arts, men continue to dispute. Whatever her powers, it would seem Daemon Targaryen was immune to them, for little is heard of this supposed sorceress whilst the prince held Harrenhal. Here's a general comparison of key characters' ages in Season 2 of House of the Dragon compared to the books. Rhaenyra Targaryen is both 32 years old in the books and Season 2 of the show. Daemon Targaryen is both 48 years old in the books and show, which Matt Smith does not look like. Alicent Hightower's age in the TV series is around Rhaenyra's age of 32, but in the books she was 41 years old. Aegon II Targaryen is 22 years old in both the books and show. Aemon Targaryen is 19 years old in both the books and show. Helaena Targaryen is 20 years old in both the books and show. Jacaerys Velaryon is both 15 years old in the books and show. Lucerys Velaryon was 14 years old. Joffrey Velaryon is 12 in the books, but his age at the end of Season 1 is not 12. Daeron Targaryen, who is Alicent's youngest son, is 15 in the books, but yet to be seen in the show. After the fall of Harrenhal to Daemon, the castle's small folk became his captives as well, amongst them a wet nurse named Alice Rivers. Who was this woman? A serving wench who dabbled in potions and spells, says Munkin. A woods witch, claims Septon Eustace. An enchantress, Mushroom would have us believe. Her name suggests birth. Munkin and Eustace tells us she was sired by Lord Lionel Strong in his callow youth, making her a natural half-sister to his sons, Harwin, Breakbones, and Larys the Clubfoot. But Mushroom insists that she was much older, that she was the wet nurse to both boys, perhaps even to their father a generation earlier. Rhaenyra and Alicent never had a secret meeting at the Great Sept in King's Landing. However, the show has Rhaenyra, with the help of Mysaria, managed to sneak into the city with minimal protection, disguising herself as a scepter. She successfully surprises Alicent during her prayers and holds her at knife point. Rhaenyra's attempt to reason with Alicent, who reached out to her in a plea for peace after Lucerys' death, was obviously going to fail after Daemon's accident had Alicent's grandson, Jaehaerys, killed. To make matters worse, Alicent reveals that Viserys' last words hinted that Aegon is the prince that was promised. Rhaenyra questions if her father shared the secret of the Song of Ice and Fire with the Hightower side, to which Alicent's shocked reaction confirms it wasn't. Alicent dismisses Rhaenyra and warns her to leave before being discovered. The Battle of the Burning Mill is not really depicted on screen in House of the Dragon Season 2, leaving its details and true history unknown to the average HBO viewer. Meanwhile, in the books, it is considered as the initial significant battle in the Dance of the Dragons that swayed the war in Rhaenyra's favor. Meanwhile, the show depicts a scene where young soldiers from houses Bracken and Blackwood are seen arguing over their support for either Aegon or Rhaenyra. The episode transitions to the aftermath of the brutal battle, with the camera showing the devastation of the burning mill and the hundreds of dead bodies left in its wake. The exact number of casualties remains uncertain. According to George R.R. Martin's A World of Ice and Fire book, this was the battle that cemented Daemon's control of the Riverlands from Harrenhal and made Aegon suddenly realize he was in the weaker position. Even though Criston Cole was made Hand of the King in the books, book and show Criston Cole are not the same people. Book Criston is cold and calculating and is often referred to as the Kingmaker. However, show Criston lacks a lot of political acumen. His poor interpersonal skills and his propensity for violence makes him a poor choice for the position. It is clear that King Aegon II chose Criston for his weakness and blind loyalty, rather than any actual qualifications for the role. Notable figures such as Otto Hightower, Tywin Lannister, and Septon Bath were all well versed to the role of Hand of the King, primarily because they were not warriors. Meanwhile, Cole's ambitions are limited to seeking revenge on Rhaenyra, stemming purely from a past rejection, rather than advancing the kingdom's interests. Whereas in the book, there was some good sense in promoting Criston to the role of Hand, since he did help secure Aegon's rise to kingship. In the third episode of House of the Dragon Season 2, Daemon's visions delve deep into his resentment towards Viserys for choosing Rhaenyra as his successor. A vision of young Rhaenyra appears before him. Rhaenyra is tending to the lifeless body of Jaehaerys Targaryen, the heir of King Aegon II, who Daemon accidentally caused the death of at the hands of Blood and Cheese. Rhaenyra confronts Daemon about his constant disappearances, causing the Targaryen prince to snap back to reality as he finds himself once again in the Godswood of Harrenhal, shaken by what he had just witnessed. Weirwood trees are known for their association with visions in the Game of Thrones universe. Daemon finds himself then in the company of Alice Rivers, who is thought to be a witch, and in the books, will one day be the lover of Aemon Targaryen and supposedly pregnant with his child. Rhaenyra was too scared to go to Rook's Rest or to attack King's Landing. Munkin says, this was because of her horror of kinslaying, supposedly, and how Maegor the Cruel had slain his own nephew Aegon the Uncrowned and had been cursed thereafter, until he bled his life away upon his stolen throne. Septon Eustace claims Rhaenyra had a mother's heart that made her reluctant to risk the lives of her remaining sons. Mushroom alone was present for these counsels, however, and the Fool insists that Rhaenyra was still so grief-sick over the death of her son Lucerys that she absented herself from the war council, giving over her command to the Sea Snake and his wife, Princess Rhaenys. Therefore, 9 days after Lord Staunton dispatched his plea for help from Rook's Rest, the sound of leather and wings was heard across the sea, and the dragon Meles appeared above his castle alone, without the support of any other dragons. This is how Aegon Targaryen's body is described after his battle with Rhaenys at Rook's Rest. King Aegon II did not die, though his burns brought him such pain that some say he prayed for death. Carried back to King's Landing in a closed litter to hide the extent of his injuries, his grace did not rise from his bed for the rest of the year. Septons prayed for him, maesters attended him with potions and milk of the poppy, but Aegon slept 9 hours out of every 10, waking only long enough to take some meagre nourishment before he slept again. None was allowed to disturb his rest, save his mother, the Queen Dowager, and his hand, Sir Criston Cole. His wife never so much as made the attempt. So lost was Helena in her own grief and madness. Aemond was also named Protector of the Realm and Prince Regent. Sir Criston Cole remained the Hand of the King, but Aemond did not take the crown for himself. Rhaenys Targaryen went out like a champ, deciding in her final moments to take Aegon with her. The crimson jaws of Meleys closed around Sunfire's golden neck for a moment, till Vhagar fell upon them from above. All three beasts went spinning towards the ground. They struck the ground so hard that stones fell from the battlements of Rook's Rest half a league away. Those closest to the dragons did not live to tell the tale. Those farther off could not see for the flame and smoke. It was hours before the fires gutted out, but from those ashes only Vhagar rose unharmed. Meleys was dead, broken by the fall and rippled to pieces upon the ground. And Sunfire, that splendid golden beast, had one wing half torn from his body, whilst his royal rider had suffered broken ribs, a broken hip, and burns that covered half his body. His left arm was the worst. The dragon flame had burnt so hot that the king's armor had melted into his flesh. After Aegon's injuries at Rook's Rest, Criston Cole told Aemond, "You must rule the realm now, until your brother is strong enough to take the crown again." The king's hand told Prince Aemond. Nor did Sir Criston need to say it twice, writes Eustace. And so, one-eyed Aemond the Kinslayer took up the iron and ruby crown of Aegon the Conqueror. "It looks better on me than it ever did on him," the prince proclaimed. Yet, Aemond did not assume the style of king. When the bird arrived announcing Sir Criston's attack on the Rook's Rest, Rhaenyra and her blacks were mourning Sir Eric and debating their proper response to this latest attack. Shaken by the attempt on her life, or the lives of her sons, Rhaenyra did not fly out to meet Criston Cole. Instead, in her place, rode Rhaenys Targaryen, the queen who never was. When she arrived, Sir Criston Cole was not dismayed. Aegon's hand had expected this, counted on it. Archers rushed forward, longbowmen and crossbowmen both, filling the air with arrows and quarrels. Scorpions shot iron bolts of the sort that had once felled Meraxus in Dawn. Meleys suffered a score of hits, but the arrows only served to make her angry. She swept down, spitting fire to the right and left. Knights burned in their saddles and horses went up in flames. Men-at-arms dropped their spears and scattered. Some tried to hide behind their shields, but neither oak nor iron could withstand dragon's breath. This is what happened to Aegon's dragon after fighting Rhaenys Targaryen. The king's dragon, Sunfire, too huge and heavy to be moved and unable to fly with his injured wing, remained in the fields beyond Rook's Rest, crawling through the ashes like some great golden wyvern. In the early days, he fed himself upon the burned carcasses of the slain. When those were gone, the men Sir Criston had left behind to guard him brought him calves and sheep. When Rhaenys unleashed her attack on Criston Cole's army, this was his response. Sir Criston sat on his white horse shouting, "Aim for the rider," through the smoke and flame. Meleys roared, smoke swirling from her nostrils, a stallion kicking in her jaws as tongues of fire engulfed him. Then came an answering roar. Two more winged shapes appeared, the king astride Sunfire the Golden and his brother Aemond upon Vhagar. Criston Cole had sprung his trap, and Rhaenys had come snatching at the bait. Now the teeth closed round her. Princess Rhaenys made no attempt to flee. With a glad cry and a crack of her whip, she turned Meleys towards the foe. Against Vhagar alone, she might have had some chance, but against Vhagar and Sunfire together, doom was certain. The dragons met violently 1,000 feet above the field of battle as balls of fire burst and blossomed, so bright that men swore later that the sky was full of suns. This is what was left of Rhaenys after Rook's Rest. A body believed to be Rhaenys Targaryen was later found beside the carcass of her dragon, but it was so blackened that no one could be sure it was her. Beloved daughter of Lady Jocelyn Baratheon and Prince Aemon Targaryen, faithful wife to Lord Corlys Valyrion, mother and grandmother, the queen who never was, lived fearlessly and died amidst blood and fire. She was 55 years old. Lord Staunton's head was carried back to King's Landing and mounted above the old gate. But it was the head of the dragon Mealy's drawn through the city on a cart that awed the crowds of small folk into silence. Septon Eustace tells us that thousands left King's Landing afterward until the Dowager Queen Alicent ordered the city gates closed and barred. This is what happened as Criston marched on Rook's Rest. With 100 knights and 500 men-at-arms of the royal household, Sir Criston marched on Roseby and Stokeworth, whose lords had only recently repented of their allegiance to the Queen, commanding them to prove their loyalty by adding their power to his own. Thus augmented, Cole's host advanced upon the walled harbour town of Duskendale, where they took the defenders by surprise. The town was sacked, the ships in the harbour set afire, Lord Darklan beheaded. His household knights and garrison were given the choice between swearing their swords to King Aegon or sharing their lord's fate. Most chose the former. Rook's Rest was Sir Criston's next objective. Forewarned of their coming, Lord Staunton closed his gates and defied the attackers. Behind his walls, his lordship could only watch as his fields and woods and villages were burned, his sheep and cattle and small folk put to the sword. And when you get the chance, check out our Game of Thrones inspired Choose Your Own Adventure game here on YouTube by clicking the video link on the screen right now.